Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 51. The next day, when it was dark, Tony got out of bed. After a brief wash, Tony went to the living room. Seeing Pichu sitting in the corner of the sofa, Tony couldn't help but wrap his hands around his chest. I saw Pichu sleeping with his eyes closed, a pair of long ears hanging down softly, shaking from time to time. Looking at Pichu like this, although he has seen it many times, Tony still has a slight color on his face. Because the cuteness of such a Pichu is simply rising in a straight line. If he hadn't known that Pichu was a living person, I'm afraid he would have thought of Pichu as the kind of super cute cartoon doll that was specially customized and took a lot of effort to make. Even if he is a playboy who likes beautiful women, seeing such a feeling that Pichu seems to be healed, he is in a good mood. But when he thought that Pichu was a man, oh no, a male, that feeling of healing was gone. Less than half a minute after Tony came to the living room, Pichu, who was closing his eyes and recuperating, woke up, felt Tony's gaze, and slowly opened his eyes calmly. "You're awake." Seeing Pichu wake up, Tony smiled and said, let's go down and have a look. Okay, pick up. Hearing this, Pichu nodded. A moment later, Pichu and Tony arrive at the lab. Tony. Jarvis, how's it going? Jarvis. Sir, we have successfully designed the first version of the Skin Language Instant Conversational Language Translator, but according to the calculations, the success rate is less than 35%. So low. Hearing this, Tony frowned slightly. It's not like there's no instant conversational language translator on the market, but those translation features are just humans. Instant translation of cross-ethnic languages is not an easy task. Jarvis. Sir, after the first version is made, after Mr. Pichu uses it, I can analyze the problems from the process of use, and then continue to improve and optimize it. Rome was not built in a day. The steel armor wasn't made by him in a day or two. One step was a success, and Tony knew it couldn't be. Hearing Jarvis's words, Tony looked at Pichu and said in a deep voice. It seems that this is the only way to go, get one out first, and then keep trying. I still don't believe that I can even build an arc reactor and steel armor, and I can be stumped by a translator. Saying this, Tony's words and demeanor exploded with confidence. Also, people who are geniuses are often very confident in themselves. If you don't even have confidence in yourself, then it's over. Is Tony Stark a genius? Yes, definitely. If you look at this in the whole world, I am afraid that no one will object. Take your time, Pikachu. Pichu was not disappointed or surprised, shook his little hand at Tony and said, then turned around and left the laboratory, continuing to return to the living room to absorb electricity. After evolving to 3 stars, Pichu is not so urgent about the idea of becoming stronger. After all, with his strength, on the current Earth, the existence that can hurt him can be counted with both hands. As for human forces, Pichu wasn't too worried. Anyway, he can be regarded as having a sign in S.H.I.E.L.D. now, and before S.H.I.E.L.D. falls, Nick Fury can help him deal with 98% of things. Hydra. Pichu is not afraid of them now. If he dares to attack him, this time he will definitely kill all the Hydras he can find, and maybe he can use this to reduce the 3 things promised Nick Fury by 1. As for the other big bosses, such as the destroyer that Loki got down, this one is solved by Thor's guy, and it shouldn't have much to do with him. In the early plot of the Marvel movie, those villain bosses are completely enough with his current strength. Even if Dormammu is the one who has stepped into the godhood in the movie universe, with Doctor Strange to negotiate terms with him, the Earth is only in danger after all. Although I don't know how much impact the so-called butterfly effect will have on the plot of the movie world because of my existence, Pichu is not panicking. As long as he doesn't mess around with things, under the effect of the so-called worldline convergence theory, the plot development of Marvel movies will move closer to the original events. What's more, there are really unknown changes, and Pichu is not afraid. Just kidding, he's also a systematic person, Pokemon. With the help of the system, he has unlimited potential to evolve infinitely until he destroys all enemies. Even if the strength is not enough to float around, it will not be timid. Of course, although Pichu's desire to become stronger is not so strong for the time being, he will not waste time for no reason. When he has nothing else to spare time to do, he will continue to devour electricity. After all, there's a snapping finger guy waiting. Pichu was thinking about the fact that he had taken the Infinity Stones for himself. Snap your fingers. If you can't get 6 gems, you snap your fingers. And judging from Thanos' performance, the gemless Thanos broke out with all his might, and his strength should be able to reach the 5-star level judged by the system with 1 foot. After all, in Avengers 4, even the gemless Thanos can suppress Saul, Tony and the American team. As the overlord of the universe that intimidated countless planets in the galaxy, Thanos did not rely on the Infinity Stones to ascend to the position of the overlord of the universe at that time. As a powerful Eternals on Saturn's moon Titan, Thanos knows all of the Eternals' superhuman philosophies, which gives him almost incalculable strength, staying power, resilience, defense, and agility. Although Thanos is very strong, the level of threat in Pichu's heart is not even as strong as that of Dormammu, who is the Lord of the Dark Dimension. 10 years into the development of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thanos is known as the strongest villain. That is because he collected 6 Infinity Stones on his strong foundation, and successfully snapped his fingers to erase half of the life in the universe. There are no Infinity Stones, and with the performance of the cinematic universe, in Pichu's opinion, Thanos is really not as good as Dormammu. Author's note. I saw a message that said that the data of my power conversion evolution point was wrong, but that book review can't be replied to. If you see this, please send another book review. Tell me which chapter, I'll take a look, thank you. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 52. Time passes slowly. Pichu devours electricity in the living room while surfing the web. Tony, on the other hand, was involved in the development of the translator in the lab. Before you know it, it's noon. Hill and Pepper arrived at the villa one after the other. After coming to the villa, I saw Pichu sitting in the corner of the sofa, the corners of Hill's mouth curled, and said with a smile. Pichu, do you miss me if you haven't seen me for more than 10 days? As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to touch Pichu. However, the next moment was unceremoniously slapped away by Pichu with his right hand. Squinting at Seal, Pichu said with a little disgust. Woman, speak well, don't move your hands and feet. Although I know you are hungry for my body, but I tell you that it is impossible. Quote. Of course, Hill didn't understand. But it didn't prevent her from seeing Pichu's little dislike. But Hill didn't care, and thought it was even more interesting. Every time I take the time to come here to play with Pichu for a while, because the fatigue caused by dealing with a large number of affairs of S.H.I.E.L.D. seems to disappear a lot, and the whole person feels a lot more relaxed. It would undoubtedly be better if Pichu was willing to let her hold her hands. If CL's thoughts were known to Pichu, he would definitely sneer at her. If the positions are reversed, then Pichu is still very happy. Pepper watched with a smile as Hill and Pichu interacted, and without seeing Tony, she couldn't help but say. Where's Tony? Don't you forget the time for what you're doing down there. Although he was asking, Pepper's tone was very affirmative, with a little helplessness. Once Tony is immersed in research, it is easy to forget to sleep and eat, which makes her worry about Tony's health, so she often finds time to come to the villa. In desperation, Pepper walked towards the staircase leading to the lab. Apparently she was going to get Tony out. After a while, Pepper and Tony come to the living room. Pepper and Hill then go into the kitchen and start preparing for today's lunch. Pichu and Tony, on the other hand, were left in the living room. Retracting his gaze from the direction of the kitchen, Tony pressed his temples with both hands, then looked at Pichu and said. The trial version is still half an hour away, so I'll try it out first, and if it doesn't work, I'll wait for Jarvis to analyze more information before making it. Quote. I'm afraid I don't have enough materials to store here, so I'll have to call Harpy and ask him to buy some and ship them over. Quote. Although he has a laboratory, most of the materials stored are used in steel armor. To get a cross-racial language translator, and to get the kind that will not be affected by the lightning released by Pichu, the requirements for materials are more special. After all, after the translator is made, it must be carried all the time. What if the translator is directly scrapped due to the electrical impact of Pichu discharge? Just take care of it. Quote. Looking at Tony, Pichu waved his right hand and said lightly, "That's right." Quote. Leaning back on the sofa, Tony seemed to think of something again, and couldn't help but look at Pichu with strange eyes. "Jarvis told me before that your appetite has grown tenfold, and you can absorb 10,000 kilowatt-hours of electricity in a minute, and tens of millions of electricity in a day." Quote. Even the power company sent me another message, reminding me that there was a lot of electricity consumption here, and wanted to ask what was going on. Quote. This villa was not built by Tony himself, but he bought it, only later he made some modifications to the villa. But electricity, water, and internet are all the original settings of the villa. And even if you buy a house, it doesn't mean you don't need to pay utility bills. Tony hadn't cared about it before, because he directly charged tens of thousands of dollars to the villa's water and electricity account. According to his daily villa consumption, tens of thousands of dollars are enough for him to use for many years. It's just that as soon as Pichu came, the tens of thousands of dollars in the villa account were gone for a few days. Although there is nothing but electricity. As for the power company, they only sent him a message to ask about the situation, instead of directly cutting off the power supply, simply because they knew who he was. However, when Pichu heard this, he glanced at Tony and typed very calmly. Calm, such a small thing, what's all the fuss? It takes less than $20,000 a day, is this little money worth caring about as a billionaire? Ideographic period. Seeing Pichu's answer, the corners of Tony's mouth twitched slightly, and he said with a black line on his face. Are you wrong in your calculations? Do you think that electricity bills are all set in stone? The power companies have regulations that once the monthly electricity consumption of each household exceeds a certain standard, the price will increase. Quote. You use tens of millions of kilowatt-hours of electricity a day, and if it goes up according to their standards, you may use $300,000 or $400,000 a day. Quote. Do you know how many dollars you shared with me for the last 3 months? More than $3 million. Quote. Although this amount of money is nothing in my eyes, according to your current situation, it costs $300,000 or $400,000 a day, and this is only the current situation. What about the future? In the future, Pichu, you will definitely evolve, and then the demand for electricity will be greater. Then millions or even tens of millions of dollars will be used up a day. If the time is short, it is better to say, if it is a long time, even if Tony Stark's net worth of tens of billions will not be able to support you in this bottomless pit. Quote. Hearing this, Pichu's ears twitched, and he blinked and looked at Tony with some confusion. Hearing Tony say this, he realized that he seemed to have forgotten about this stubble, and then miscalculated. No wonder Nick Fury's boiled egg was in a hurry to find him a. Author's words. The electricity bill here, hundreds of thousands and millions. I am a number I think casually. According to one of the data I searched on the internet, residential electricity is 13.26 0.91 RMB cents per kilowatt-hour. Enterprises are 6.53 0.45 cents per kilowatt-hour. More than a certain electricity standard will increase the price. If it is calculated, it is too time-consuming, so here we just look at the meaning. Just know that the protagonist is very expensive. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 53. Tut, it turns out that I unknowingly used millions of dollars. After hearing Tony's words, after being stunned, Pichu couldn't help but secretly smack his tongue and muttered in his heart. More than $3 million in 3 months, even if rounded up to make up a whole number of 3 million. If it is converted into RMB, even if it is only calculated at the exchange rate of 1.6, it is 18 million RMB. He had never seen so much money. As a result, he now spends as much as 3 months on electricity. No wonder Nick Fury only stayed for a month after his evolution, and then hurriedly threw him to Tony. It turned out that he felt sorry for his money. The big boss of the dignified shield, can make a lot of money by deducting a little bit from anywhere casually. Pichu didn't believe that he didn't have a small coffers of his own. After being the big boss of S.H.I.E.L.D. for so many years, it is impossible for the small treasury to be less than $100 million. After all, every year S.H.I.E.L.D. receives billions, if not tens of billions. As a result, millions of dollars scared him. Tisk, what a stingy guy. Anyway, they're also strategic partners, aren't they? Secretly smacking his tongue and scorning Nick Fury's slamming in his heart, Pichu typed. So much, I can't afford to sell me, why don't you go to that boiled egg for reimbursement, he threw me here to eat and drink. Quote. Hearing this, Tony couldn't help but look at Pichu with disdain. Who said I can't afford to sell you? If you're willing to cooperate with me to study your body structure and give you $100 million as a reward, why don't you think about it? In the end, Tony's malicious eyes looked at Pichu. You're thinking, Peach. Quote. Hearing Tony's words, Pichu couldn't help but roll his eyes. Just kidding, he doesn't know how special he is. In this world full of black technology, if you dare to leave your blood or DNA to those scientists, who knows what kind of monster will come out in the end. What happened before Banner is a prime example. In order to destroy the Hulk, he gave a little bit of his own blood to Dr. Stern, and as a result, Dr. Stern directly used that little blood to make a large copy of the sample. Well, no kidding. Quote. Seeing Pichu roll his eyes, Tony couldn't help but smile, then put his left hand in front of him, supported his left hand with his right hand, gently pinched his chin with his hand, and looked at Pichu and said in a deep voice. Seriously, this problem has to be solved. Quote. Although I have money, I feel that I am losing money by throwing it to the power company like this, so I have to think of a way to get the best of both worlds. Quote. Well, let's say I'll build my own power generation. Quote. Speaking of this, Tony couldn't help but nod slightly, and continued with a feasible expression. Anyway, I have the arc reactor, build a power generation device, and directly use the reactor as an energy source, and the converted electricity is enough for you to absorb for a long time. Quote. Have an idea? Hearing this, Pichu on the side couldn't help but nod slightly. Originally called the plasma arc reactor, the arc reactor is a small, controlled nuclear fusion reactor that produces enormous amounts of energy and virtually no pollution. The amount of electricity that an arc reactor can convert seems to be enough for New York City for a long time, whether it was months or years, Pichu can't remember. After shutting down the Stark Group's weapons manufacturing department, which started with arms, Tony wanted to use this to enter the energy field, and with his identity as Iron Man, the market value of Stark Group exceeded that of the past. If the arc reactor is used as an energy source to convert electricity, this is undoubtedly the best of both worlds. Thinking of the arc reactor, Pichu couldn't help but say in his heart. System, can you directly absorb the energy of the reactor? System. Not for the time being. The essential energy produced by the arc reactor is nuclear energy, although it can be converted into electrical energy. It is not electrical energy, and only the nuclear energy produced by the upgraded reactor can barely reach the strength of the original level. Quote. Got it. Hearing the explanation of the system, Pichu immediately understood the meaning of the system. Tony's current reactor uses palladium as a transition to nuclear fusion reactions, and the nuclear energy produced is not within the range of source-level energy determined by the system. After upgrading, the nuclear fusion reaction is carried out with the new element, space gem energy, as the core, and the nuclear energy produced can reach the origin-level energy intensity. As for what the system said, it could only barely reach the origin level, and Pichu could roughly guess the reason. It is estimated that after the reactor nuclear fusion is converted into nuclear energy, the strength of the new element, space energy, is reduced, but after all, the strength itself is high enough, so it can still maintain a certain strength. That is to say, if you wait for another year, there will be no need to stay in the room every day to absorb electricity. You can carry an arc reactor with you, and you can absorb a lot of energy and convert it into evolution points every moment. Quote. Thinking of this, Pichu suddenly felt in a good mood. Pichu, what are you thinking? At this time, Tony's somewhat puzzled voice sounded, it turned out that he suddenly found that Pichu seemed to be in a trance, and he didn't even seem to listen to his words, and he couldn't help but feel a little helpless. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 54. Pichu, what are you thinking? Tony looked at Pichu with some confusion and helplessness. Even if I tell you about things related to you, I'm still in a trance, is there any mistake? If it weren't for the fact that he had been good friends with Pichu for a few months, he wouldn't have bothered to waste so much thought about things related to Pichu. Sorry, pick up. Quote. Coming back to his senses, Pichu hurriedly apologized, and then typed. I'm sorry, just now I was thinking about the feasibility of the method you said, and I found that this solution is really good, worthy of you Tony, you thought of such a good solution so quickly. Quote. Pichu couldn't help but think in his heart. There's no way, after all, eating him uses him, plus it's wrong for him just now, so let's say something nice for the time being. Quote. Haha, you finally admit that I'm a genius. Quote. Seeing Pichu's words, Tony couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, the corners of his mouth raised, and his face was full of happy smiles. After all, Pichu was often scolding him after he arrived here. Now that he can get praise from Pichu, he actually feels flattered. This thought came to mind. Tony couldn't help but be stunned, and then secretly surprised. Fake, how could I have such thoughts? Do I need someone else to admit it? In fact, he doesn't know that being recognized by the people he cares about is different from the recognition of ordinary people. Or, it's not that he doesn't know, but he just hasn't thought of it for the time being. If he didn't even care about the thoughts of the people he cared about, how could he have a stiff relationship with his father Howard just to be recognized? He can not care about other people's, but he can't not care about what the people he cares about think. Shaking his head, in Pichu's strange eyes, Tony returned to the subject, pinched his chin slightly with his right hand and said. Now that you've agreed, once we've got the translator in place, we can start designing a small power generator that fits your size. Quote. Hearing this, Pichu thought of something, and couldn't help typing. And what about your Mark V? Seeing this, Tony smiled and said, that's just a concept, let's finish these two things of yours first. Anyway, my Mark IV has been completed, I'll go out for a walk in a few days. Quote. Looking at Tony, Pichu couldn't help but be slightly silent. What's wrong? Seeing Pichu looking directly at him, Tony couldn't help frowning slightly, and then looked at himself, thinking that something was wrong. Pichu shook his head, and then typed. I have a question that I have always wanted to ask, how can you not solve the problem of your body? Tony was stunned for a moment, then looked down at his chest, and said in a deep. Perhaps, keeping it makes me feel a sense of responsibility. Quote. Hearing this, Pichu fell silent again. For a moment, the air was suddenly quiet. What are you doing? At this moment, Pepper's voice rang out, breaking the silence. Coming back to his senses, Tony stood up with a smile, looked at Pepper and said. It's nothing, is lunch ready? Little Pepper smiled and nodded, it's done, clean up the table and eat. Quote. I'll help. Quote. Tony said with a smile, then turned his head and winked at Pichu, and walked in the direction of the table. Quote. Quote. Pichu rolled his eyes. Looking at Tony's back, Pichu fell into deep thought. Do you want to tell him about the new elements in advance? Tony was a little embarrassed to be so nice to him. After thinking about it, Tony found out that he couldn't solve it because of palladium poisoning, so he gave up on himself, and even transferred the company to Pepper, and went to participate in dangerous racing competitions. Thinking of this, Pichu couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Pichu, come over and eat. Quote. At this moment, Tony's voice interrupted Pichu's musings. It's coming. Quote. Pichu came back to his senses, suppressed the thoughts in his heart, shouted, and then turned off the power of the power transmission device, turned on the high-speed movement, and turned into an electric light and appeared at the dining table. Then jump to your feet and jump into a specially raised seat. Usually Pichu only eats some fruit on the sofa, and when he has a meal like this, he only comes to the table to eat when Pepper and Hill are there. A short lunch can give everyone a taste of what it feels like to live in an ordinary person. What is it like to live in the ordinary person? When a family is together, it's okay to be plain and happy. After eating, Hill and Pepper stayed for a while before leaving together. After all, they are all busy. After Seal and Pepper left, Pichu didn't continue to absorb the villa's electricity. Instead, he and Tony came to the lab and worked hard to speed up the development of a language translator. As for the power conversion device, neither Pichu nor Tony were in a hurry to get it. Things have to come one by one. What's more, Tony is just an ordinary person. Energy is limited, and dual purpose or even multi-purpose will always bring more or less impact. And in these aspects, Pichu is basically the kind that has 9 out of 10 tricks. So get the translator out first, and then help think about how to get the power plant. Author's note: thank you for sleeping through the ages. Monthly pass. 100,000 words can be put on the shelves, and now the requirements are met. But I'm going to apply for it on the shelves. I'm going to apply tomorrow. It should be on the shelves the day after tomorrow. I'll update a few more chapters for free. Just take it as a plus chapter ode. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, chapter 55. Half a month later. Night fell, 11:30 in the evening. Villa in an underground laboratory. Pichu stands on a workbench with an orange-yellow headset around her neck and metal plates engraved with a red lightning bolt pattern on the outside of the 2 headphone panels. This headset is actually Tony's instant conversational language translator. As for why it is a headphone shape, it is entirely because of Pichu's requirements. Anyway, the shape or something, as long as the built-in is done, the shape can be made into a lot of shapes. This translator is mainly made of titanium alloy, and is mixed with some other high-temperature, non-conductive materials, which can ensure that the translator will not be easily damaged by the lightning released by Pichu. Well, good looks. Quote. Looking at Pichu, who was wearing a headphone-shaped translator, Tony supported his right hand with his left hand, pinched his chin slightly with his right hand, and couldn't help nodding slightly, with a look of satisfaction on his face. Then Tony said to Pichu, "Then let's try it. What has failed more than 20 times to get out? It's time to see how it works." Quote. Hearing this, Pichu nodded. At the same time, he also has a lot of expectations. Raised his left hand and pressed the button on the left side of the translator. There is a button on each side of the translator, the power switch on the left and the charging unit on the right. After turning on the switch, Pichu took a light breath and said, "Pick up Tony." A second later, Ashota's voice came out of the translator. He speaks English, and his words are clear, but it feels a little mechanical. There is no doubt that the research on instant conversational language translators has been successful. Although Tony and Pichu already knew about this result when they conducted the simulation test before, they were very happy when the actual product was made. After all, this is a work that they worked hard for half a month and failed more than 20 times before they came up with it. You know, Jarvis had to go through hundreds of thousands of calculations each time to get the best result, and then they failed more than 20 times to succeed. If it weren't for the super AI Jarvis, who knows how long it would have taken them to get this instant conversational language translator out there. Well, today is a day to be happy, and I decided to take out a bottle of my treasured wine out to celebrate. Hearing the word Tony coming out of the translator, Tony couldn't help but laugh, and with a slap of his hands, he decided to go and have a drink to celebrate. But after saying this, Tony suddenly thought of something, and couldn't help but looked at Pichu and said, "By the way, Pichu, can you drink?" Listening to the voice, "You seem to be still a child, are you an adult?" "It's better not to drink when you're a minor, it seems that I can only enjoy it alone, comfortable." Quote. At the end, Tony smacked his tongue slightly, making a look of enjoyment. Hearing Tony's suspicion that he was underage, and seeing Tony's underbeaten appearance, Pichu was not happy at that time, and couldn't help but hold his hands on his chest, and threatened with a fierce light in his eyes. "Of course you can. Why can't you drink it? Be careful that I drink all the wine you treasure." Quote. Picho's kawaii appearance coupled with the voice of Jungtai from the translator, the feeling of being fierce and fierce seems to be overflowing, as if this thread is still a little cute. Alright, quote. Seeing Pichu threatening himself, Tony was immediately startled, for fear that Pichu would really drink all those treasured good wines for him. After all, many of them are difficult to buy with money. So he quickly changed the topic, and Tony said to Pichu as he walked outside, let's go see what we want to drink tonight. Quote. Seeing this, Pichu also followed. In fact, he's been hungry for Tony's drinks for a long time. Now that he finally has the opportunity to try it, he naturally won't miss it easily. Half an hour later, Pickle and Tony drank half a bottle of their precious red wine and went back to their rooms to sleep. And Pichu naturally slept in the living room. It's better to say that it's better to sleep than to close your eyes. After evolving to 3 stars, Pichu found that he was very energetic, and he couldn't sleep at night, and he felt a little tired if he didn't sleep for more than half a month. Time passes slowly in the unique silence of the night. Day after day, since getting the translator out, Pichu has been able to communicate with Tony, Pepper, and Seal without hindrance. After Nick Fury found out about this, he even took the time to have a video with Pichu. Then Pichu opened his mouth to say a braised egg, which made his face darken, and directly ended the video chat. Pichu naturally pouted disdainfully in this regard. There's really no harm if there's no contrast. You look at someone else, Tony, you're looking at you. And just like that, time flies. Before I knew it, more than half a year had passed. At this time, it is the end of the year, and Christmas is still a month away. For most of the year, everything was peaceful. But Pichu knew that something was about to happen. He had thought about whether to tell Tony that the model of the future city that Howard had left him contained a key point in extracting new elements. Later, Pichu chatted with Tony vaguely, pretending not to care and referring to the futuristic city model, but Tony didn't care too much. In this case, Pichu also felt that it was better to let it be. And the matter of palladium poisoning, he thinks it is not necessarily a bad thing for Tony. After all, this is also a part of Tony's growth, and the results for Tony in the end are good, not like the sequelae of the New York War. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 56. On this day, Pichu came to the laboratory. Tony was then seen sleeping on his stomach on the workbench. Seeing this, Pichu couldn't help but shake his head slightly, and then said, Jarvis, what's going on with my armor? Jarvis, sir, the simulation of the Pikachu Warframe has been completed, and the simulation is still being carried out, and at the current pace, it will be ready for real production in 1 day if nothing else. He said. Hearing this, Pichu smiled slightly excitedly. The Pikachu armor is a set of steel armor that is attached to the shape of his Pikachu. Making him a suit of armor was offered by Tony a month ago. At first, he was a little confused when he heard Tony ask him if he wanted a suit. He knew how much Tony valued the Warframe. And Tony is still a Tsunere. In Iron Man 2, because of his palladium poisoning, he wanted to give his good friend Rhodes a set of armor, but he pretended to have a fight with him. Do you really think that the steel armor can be used when you want to? What are you kidding? Without Tony's permission, Rod wouldn't have been able to use Mark II at all. After all, each suit is Tony's brainchild. The intelligent systems equipped with the Warframe are all subroutines that split off from Jarvis, and as long as Tony doesn't agree, unless he can defeat Jarvis, he doesn't want to take control of the Warframe. However, now that Tony asks him if he wants a suit, Pickle wonders if he hasn't woken up, or if he's confused from staying up too late. In this sentence, Pichu has already met with Rhodes, and the relationship is not bad now. After hearing Tony's words at that time, he was stunned for a moment, and Pichu asked directly. Tony, do you have a lot of brains to ask me if I want a set of steel armor? Isn't this your treasure? What do you mean? Hearing the brain what? Tony didn't understand the meaning for a while, but when he heard Pichu's words, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. I don't want to be in line with that stingy egg, although the iron armor is my treasure, but you're also my friend, just a suit, not for the ill-intentioned conspirators outside. Quote. If Nick Fury had heard Pichu and Tony's conversation, he would have said his famous quote. What happened to him? He obviously didn't appear. Why is he always hacked? It's so hard. Hearing Tony's words, Pichu couldn't help but rub his cheeks and said, then why did you suddenly remember to want to give me a whole steel armor? Tony raised his eyebrows and smiled. It just came to me suddenly. I remember you can't fly. I'll make you one, and you can experience the feeling of flying like a bird in the sky. Quote. How's that? Don't you feel particularly moved when you hear this? Hearing this, Pichu looked at Tony with a strange expression. The mood is a little complicated. There is an inexplicable feeling of wanting to laugh in the touch. After thinking about it, Pichu coughed dryly, rubbed his cheeks and said. What, Tony? I'll fly. Quote. What? Hearing this, Tony's expression froze directly, and he looked at Pichu a little dumbfounded. Co-authored, he was tricked by Pichu. Although I wanted to be angry a little, but thinking of Pichu's character, and this was more than half a year ago, the corners of Tony's mouth twitched, and he looked at Pichu with a black line. This guy has such a bad personality. Forget it, adults don't remember villains, and thinking too much will only make you more angry. After comforting himself a few words in his heart, and didn't bother to continue to delve into this issue, Tony said angrily. Since you can fly, do you still want the iron armor? Yes, of course. Quote. Hearing this, Pichu immediately nodded. Although the iron armor is of little use to him, it would be nice to have a tailor-made set of steel armor, even if it is just to keep as a treasure. That's fine. Quote. Tony nodded, pinched his chin and said, wait until I get Mark 5 out, and then I'll start designing your armor, but I'll need some of your body data. Quote. By the way, considering your own ability, I will make some changes to the functions of the warframe. My idea is not to add weapon functions to you, leaving only basic functions such as flight and communication. Quote. If you need it, I can improve the warframe function, directly absorb the electrical energy you release, and then convert it into the use of the warframe's flight, weapons, and other functions. Quote. In this case, you may be able to transform the arc reactor into a battery, and even if the reactor runs out of energy, it can absorb the electricity you release to replenish its energy. Quote. In this way, it's very similar to the concept of a warframe that I envisioned. Quote. Stop. Hearing Tony keep talking, Pichu only felt some pain in his skull, and hurriedly stopped him. You don't have to tell me so much about these things, my armor will do what you just said. Quote. Tisk, okay. Quote. Seeing this, Tony pouted slightly. Thinking back to the scene a month ago, Pichu couldn't help but rub his cheeks. Is so good to him, it seems that he will have to take care of him more in the future. At least it's impossible to watch Tony die later on because of something that snaps his fingers. Thanos, the Infinity Stones. Author's note. Thank you for the monthly pass to Insistence, Bloody Angel, and Meteor Pound Knight. Thank you for the 100-point reminder of Waiting for the Dawn, and thank you for the 2,000-point reminder of Meteor Knight. In other words, how is the number of words counted, whether it is cumulative or not? The number of words I have before the reminder should have arrived. Why can't I get the reminder ticket? Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 57. At this moment, Tony, who was sleeping, moved, then opened his eyes and straightened up. Seeing Pichu, Tony stood up and moved his somewhat sore body as he asked. Jarvis, what time is it? Jarvis. Sir, it's 7:35 a.m. Tony nodded, looked at Pichu and said, I'll go wash my face first. Quote. He stayed up late last night and slept on the workbench again, and he was still not awake. Go. Quote. Hearing this, the sharp-eyed found the bloodshot in Tony's eyes, and Pichu waved his right hand. Looking at the time, the poisoning caused by palladium should also appear soon. After a while, Tony washed up and returned to the lab. Looking at Pichu, Tony said with a smile. Why do you have time to come to the lab today? Do you want to see how your armor is doing? 4 months ago, he had a small reactor generator out. Although he made several changes, The small reactor generator was still much larger than Pichu's, so the discharge motor was placed in a bedroom. After that, Pichu basically stayed in the bedroom to absorb electricity. And it will only go out once or twice in 10 days and half a month. Now that Pichu had come to the lab so early, all he could think of was that Pichu wanted to check the progress of the battle armor. That's right. Quote. Pichu nodded. Tony rubbed his temples and said, the 3D simulation is done, and everything is fine, but it will need to be tried out when it is made. Quote. There's no rush on this. Pichu looked at Tony and asked thoughtfully. You look tired, do you want to take a break? It's okay, it's just the after effects of staying up late. Quote. Tony smiled and didn't care, then said, when your Pikachu armor comes out, let's go up to the sky and play together. Heaven plays with. Hearing this, Pichu subconsciously wanted to roll his eyes. This kind of thing is something that only a person of Tony's status dares to say without care. But Pichu was also interested. He got the ability to float electromagnetically after upgrading to 3 stars, but after so many days, he hasn't used it once. However, it seems that it is quite good to use Chufei on steel armor. Agreed. Quote. Thinking of this, Pichu stretched out his hand and made a thumbs-up gesture to Tony. Well, Pikachu has fingers, it's just a bit short. 3 days later. The Pikachu Warframe is finally built. The color is composed of gold and red, of which red is mainly gold, and the reactor on the chest is round, and the overall appearance is not much different from Pikachu. Well, it's like a different skin. Soon, with the help of Jarvis's robotic arm, Pichu was able to put on the Pikachu armor. Inside the battle armor, Pichu looked at the holographic operation panel and said, Xiao Pai, how is the situation of the instant dialogue language translation system? This set of Pikachu armor, when making it, Tony also added the instant dialogue language translator function to the armor function. After all, Pichu couldn't wear a translator around his neck and wear a battle armor. As for Xiao Pai, it is the name that Pichu gave to Pikachu Warframe's intelligent system. A sweet royal sister's voice sounded in Pichu's ears. Xiaopi. Sir, there is nothing wrong with the language translation system. Quote. Tony, can you hear me? Pichu tried the instant conversational language translation feature. I can hear you. Quote. Tony heard Pichu's inquiry, nodded and said, it seems that there is no problem with integrating the instant dialogue translation function into the Warframe. Quote. There was no problem with the instant conversation translation function, and Pichu began to experiment with other features. The first is the flight function. Most of the functions of the Iron Warframe are neural connections, as long as Pichu gives instructions in his head. Buzz. As Pichu gave the order, the hands and feet of the battle armor immediately erupted with ionic flames. The power grew steadily under the control of Xiao Pai, and with the thrust of the ion flame, Pichu flew staggeringly and quickly mastered the balance. Pichu then stopped flying. Come with Tony to the weapon function testing area. Pichu stretched out his right hand and launched an attack on the Kokkan more than 10 meters away. With a "bew" sound, Pichu's right hand shook slightly, and a thumb-thick beam cannon shot out in an instant, blasting the Kokkan into a pile of crumbs. There are no problems with flying and palm cannons, and the next step is to try to recharge. Pichu's mind moved, and golden lightning bolts were released from the electrical pouches on either side of his cheek. Sir, a large amount of electrical energy has been detected inside the battle armor. Do you want to absorb and recharge it? At the same time, Xiao Pai's voice sounded in Pichu's ears. Pichu. Recharge. Quote. Then Pichu saw that the energy scale in the upper left corner began to increase, gradually increasing from the previous 100% to 101% and 102%, and the speed was not very fast. It was estimated that it would take 2 or 3 seconds to increase by 1%. Pichu remembers that in Avengers 1, Tony ate a lightning bolt from Thor, and his energy instantly soared to 300%. But Pichu didn't care too much about this. Anyway, he didn't want to use the Pikachu armor to fight. Since there was nothing wrong with charging, Pichu turned on the flight function, consumed the overflowing energy, and then stopped testing the Pikachu Warframe. Author's note. Thank you for the commuter pass of Schulefife. Thanks to the 200 points of Lime Does Not Sprout. By the way, what illustrations can't be seen, it really has nothing to do with me. I also used the mobile phone app to look at it, and found that you can see the illustrations. The illustration of this chapter is a figure picture I found on the internet, just take a look. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 58. After the test, do you want to fly around the sky with me? Seeing that Pichu had finished testing, Tony put his hands in front of his chest and made a proposal. Let's go. Quote. Pichu nodded immediately. Seeing that Pichu agreed, Tony immediately went to put on the finished Mark IV. Then have Jarvis open the door to the underground garage. There is also a floor below the laboratory, which is the underground garage of the villa. And the garage has a tunnel that leads to the outside. After arriving at the underground garage, Pichu and Tony turned on the flight function of the warframe, and flew out of the villa along the tunnel, heading towards the Pacific Ocean. Nearly 1,000 meters in the air. Pichu and Tony fly side by side. Pichu turned his head to look at Tony and said, Little Pi, increase your flight speed. Quote. Pip. Yes, sir. Quote. As soon as he remembered the words, the power of the thrusters on his hands and feet increased suddenly, and Pichu rushed out with a sigh, leaving Tony behind. Jarvis, speed up. Seeing this, Tony immediately increased his speed and chased after Pichu. Bang bang bang. The air behind Pichu and Tony explodes. It turned out that both Pichu and Tony were speeding faster than Mach 1, which is the speed of sound, thus causing a sonic boom, a vision in which the air seemed to be torn apart. Just when Pichu and Tony were flying happily in an airbase. Looking at the two supersonic UFOs detected by the radar, the soldier sitting in front of the console changed his expression slightly, and hurriedly said to a soldier next to him. Quick, contact Colonel Rhodes. Quote. A few moments later, Tony's best friend, Colonel Rhodes, arrived. Rod frowned. What happened? The soldier immediately said, Sir, two supersonic UFOs, one large and one small, have just been detected over the Pacific Ocean near the port of Malibu, California. Quote. Port of Malibu, California. Hearing this, Rod immediately thought of Tony, because Tony's villa was there. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and he immediately walked to the side and took out his mobile phone to contact Tony. Over the Pacific Ocean. Sir, Colonel Rhodes has called you. Quote. Jarvis's voice rang in Tony's ears. Tony. Connected. Quote. After connecting, before Tony could speak, Rhodes took the lead in speaking. Tony, are you in heaven? It's me. It's been a while since Mark IV was built, and the weather is good today, so I'm going to come out and test the performance. Tony replied with a smile. The corners of S' mouth twitched, and Rod was a little helpless. We have detected a total of 2 targets, one large and one small, one is you, and the other is who? He was very helpless about Tony's words. Tony just flew up in the sky, but it made them nervous. Tony. And then there's Pichu. Quote. What? It's Pichu. Hearing this, Rhodes was taken aback and couldn't help but exclaim. Boom. The soldiers around him looked at him in unison. Reacting to this, Rod hurriedly lowered his voice and said, How could it be Pichu? Although he and Pichu have met, and they are also good friends. He only knew that Pichu was quite intelligent, and he was no worse than a human at all. But I don't know much about Pichu's other abilities. And he didn't know about Tony's armor for Pichu. After all, he hadn't been to Tony's villa for more than a month. I built him a suit of armor. Tony didn't mean to hide it. What? Hearing this, Rhodes was shocked again, and then there was a burst of envy. After all, he had been hungry for steel armor for a long time. Although he also wanted a set of steel armor, thinking of his identity, Rod still suppressed this thought. After all, he is a military colonel, and if he gets a set of steel armor, he will definitely cause a series of troubles. After all, some of the military's top brass have always coveted Tony's armor. They have always wanted to get the technology of the warframe, and then use the technology to mass-produce the warframe to arm the whole army. If this happens, the world will change dramatically. Coming back to his senses, Rod said helplessly. Okay, I see, I'll come to the villa tomorrow to see you. Quote. With that, Rod hung up the phone. Sir. Seeing that Rod hung up the phone, the soldiers around him looked at him. With a solemn expression, Rod spoke. Convey it, as long as they don't make any trouble, don't care about them. If the media asks about it, it will be a military exercise. Quote. Yes, sir. Quote. Hearing this, the soldiers glanced at each other, and then they all relaxed. In case of indecision, military exercises. Well, a good excuse. As for whether others believe it or not, it has nothing to do with them. The other side. Tony contacts epithet. Tony. Pichu. Rhodes just called me and said we were on the military's radar detection, and they were nervous. Quote. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. Hearing this, Pichu was stunned for a moment, and then his face was black. Gone, just on a whim, he didn't even turn on anti-radar detection. If it weren't for Rhodes, I'm afraid the military would have been waiting for the fighters. If it's serious, it's likely to be a missile aim, and then give them a big gift. When he was speechless in his heart, Pichu hurriedly said. All right, don't bother Rod, let's go back. Quote. After speaking, Pichu said again. Xiaopi, turn on anti-radar detection. Quote. Xiaopi. Sir, it's already on. Quote. Okay, go back. Quote. Tony, on the other side, was a little unsatisfied when he heard this, but he still agreed to go back. He could already think of how Rhodes would be talking to him when he came tomorrow. With anti-radar detection activated, Pichu and Tony returned to the villa. The next day, Rhodes drove to the villa alone. And then to Tony as a burst of complaints. In order to help Tony solve the trouble, he was almost reprimanded by the above. Fortunately, he dragged Tony out in time to block the front. Some of the people above were really angry and helpless when they heard that it was Tony who did it. Although they would love to teach Tony a lesson. But Tony's identity is special, and now he has become Iron Man. As long as Tony doesn't do anything big to kill the country's dignitaries or commit treason, they can't do anything about Tony. And Tony also has a strong network, and the Stark Group has a number of collaborations with the military. Therefore, this kind of thing, many people are willing to settle for Tony. Those who can't get used to Tony can only be incompetent and furious. In the face of Rod's complaints, Tony immediately said a few apologies, and then took out the remaining half bottle of wine from the last celebration from the wine cellar and used it to entertain Rod. After drinking good wine, coupled with Tony's kind words, Rod was in good spirits at the time. In fact, he wasn't angry at all, complaining just to get something from Tony to fill his envy for Pichu's steel armor. Of course, Tony, who has been a good friend of Rhodes for many years, also understands. Maybe this is the so-called tacit understanding. Author's words. What's that? I made a mistake. I thought 100,000 words could be put on the shelves, but I asked the editor, and the editor said that it would take 120,000 words to be on the shelves, and I applied for a new book to be strongly recommended, and I don't know if I can get it on tomorrow. I hope it can be recommended, and then say that a few people read the book, and increase the subscription score on the shelves. Actually, I don't think there are many people who chase books, and there are many people who don't like to join groups, so the point of establishing a book group is not very great. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 59. Another 10 days passed. Before you know it, it's Christmas. In many Western countries, Christmas is the equivalent of the Chinese New Year. Therefore, in the first few days of Christmas, many people are preparing things for Christmas. For example, Christmas pine trees, Santa hats, and Christmas stockings. On Christmas Day, Villa Tony is also very lively. Hill, Pepper, Harpy, and Rhodes are all here. In addition to this, Coulson is also here. With the addition of Pichu and Tony, there is a total of 1 Pokemon and 6 people. Everyone decorated the villa together, and then each made a little bit of dishes to form a big meal. After eating, Hill and Coulson stayed for about half an hour before leaving. After all, their status makes it difficult for them to live like ordinary people, and it's nice to be able to spare a few hours without a vacation. Hill and Coulson leave, after which Harpy also drives away with Pepper. After all, the company still has a lot to deal with. Stark Group is headquartered in Manhattan, New York. Tony's villa is located in the port of Malibu, California. From the map of the United States, California is in the west of the United States, while New York is in the northeast on the other side of the United States, and the two states are almost a distance apart. So when they came, they all flew to California. Otherwise, if you drive yourself, you don't know how long you will drive. Hill and the others left, and the villa returned to its daily atmosphere. Back in the lab, Tony began to design the Mark V while thinking about what style of steel armor the Mark VI would design in the future. For example, make the anti-lightning armor that I thought of before. The other side. Pichu returns to the room, turns on the small reactor generator, and begins to devour the electricity converted from nuclear energy. Now, more than half a year has passed. Although not every day is spent devouring electricity. But after more than half a year of accumulation, Pichu has now also gained more than 8 million evolution points. It takes 100 million evolution points to reach 4 stars, and more than 8 million is only about 1/12 of the total. For this, Pichu is not in a hurry now. Pichu also asked the system before, he is now 3 stars, and his physical fitness is enough to fight against the normal Hulk, can he absorb the lightning in nature? The answer given by the system made Pichu speechless for a while. System: Master, with your current physical strength, you can indeed try to absorb the energy of lightning, but I don't recommend that you do so. Quote: First of all, the temperature caused by lightning can reach 3 to 5 times the surface temperature of the sun, and even if you are struck by lightning with the current strength of your body, you will be severely burned. Quote: Moreover, the energy of an ordinary lightning bolt is about 5 billion joules, and the converted electricity is only more than 1,400 kilowatt-hours without considering the loss in the transmission and conversion process. Quote: So instead of absorbing lightning that does more harm than good, the system recommends that the owner choose to start with mild energy. Quote: At that time, when he heard the system's answer, Pichu's face was black. It turns out that lightning in nature is completely dispensable to him. But it means that he will be stronger in the future, and he can directly rush into the thunderstorm, so that the system will swallow the entire thunderstorm, although the power is less, but it can be made up by quantity. And dispensable, of course, means that lightning is too dangerous for him now, and the benefits are pitiful, and it is completely impossible to treat lightning in nature as non-existent. After hearing the system's analysis, Pichu decisively ignored the lightning in nature. He is not a masochist, he injures himself for more than 1,000 kilowatt-hours of electricity, and the person who chooses to do this is either a masochist or has an abnormal brain. And what about relying on small reactor generators? Not only is it not injured, but the system is able to absorb the maximum amount of power every minute. After Tony makes a new element reactor, there is no need to convert electricity to absorb at that time, and it is completely possible to directly absorb the nuclear energy of the reactor and convert it into evolution points. So choose the reactor, isn't it fragrant? Time flies. 3 months later. It was the end of March 2010. 3:25 p.m. Today, instead of staying in the room and continuing to devour electricity, Pichu lay on the pool chair next to the outdoor pool outside the villa, blowing the sea breeze and basking in the sun. Stay at home every day, and if you don't come out to bask in the sun, you will get moldy. Pichu. Quote: Tony's voice came, opening Pichu's eyes, which were closed. When I opened my eyes and turned my head, I saw Tony coming over. So I started to put on the translator that I had put aside. Tony, what's wrong? Looked at Tony, Pichu was a little puzzled. He keenly noticed that Tony's expression seemed a little strange. Nothing. Quote: After coming to the side, Tony had already restrained the slightly weird look on his face, and said with a smile. 3 days later, in the evening, there's a Stark fair in Rafa, New York, and I'm going to go there. Are you going? Exposition. Hearing this, Pichu shook his ears, and his right hand couldn't help but rub his cheeks. He knew what was going on. It turned out that Tony had discovered that he had been poisoned by overuse of palladium. No wonder he looked a little strange just now. Thinking in his heart, Pichu remained silent on the surface and said lazily, "I'm not going, it's too far, and I don't want to go out and show my face. After all, with my appearance, I will definitely attract the attention of those beautiful women, then you won't have a chance." Quote. Bah. Hearing this, the corners of Tony's mouth trembled slightly, and he said with a look of contempt, "Let's not talk about whether I have the intention of hunting for beauty now. Do you think that with your little cuteness, you can beat me as a billionaire and Iron Man? Believe it or not, I think the whole villa will be occupied by all kinds of beautiful women tonight." Quote. "You cowhide, I can't compare to you if you have the ability to make money." Pichu couldn't help but roll her eyes, looking at Tony with a look of great money ability. Tony was stunned for a moment, then said with a smile, "That's a good title, it's quite suitable for me." Quote. Pichu rubbed his cheeks. Yes, what you said is right." Quote. Tony couldn't help but support his right hand with his left hand on his chest, gently pinched his chin with his right hand, nodded thoughtfully and said with a smile, "Later, when I appeared in public wearing armor, when I introduced myself to others, I said that I was the Iron Man who was a super genius, handsome, and money conscious." Quote. Go, play, don't get in my way from the sun here." Quote. Hearing this, Pichu rolled his eyes, waved his hand in disgust, and made a move to catch people. Tony looked at his position in astonishment, and then looked up at the sun diagonally above, and suddenly there was a black line on his face. "God is blocking you from basking in the sun. Forget it, it's a pity if you don't go. The Stark Group Expo doesn't happen every year, and I'm going to go to the company to see the situation." Quote. Tony sighed regretfully, and then said, "I won't be back until 3 days, since you don't go, forget it." Quote. With that, Tony waved his hand, turned around and left the pool, and walked towards the villa. After Tony left, Pichu turned his head to look at it with a pensive look on his face. Author's note. I don't know how many joules of energy an ordinary lightning bolt is. I have searched several data on the internet. There are 5 billion joules, 2 billion joules, and 1 billion joules, so I took the largest one. If there is a big guy who knows the real detailed data, you can send a comment to tell me. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 60. Looking at Tony's departing figure, Pichu fell into deep thought. The Stark Fair is approaching, and Tony also discovers that he has been poisoned with palladium due to his excessive use of steel armor. Then he can talk to Nick Fury next. Judging from the plot of the movie, Nick Fury has been monitoring Tony's situation. After a while, under Pichu's watchful eye, Tony soared into the sky in Mark IV and flew towards New York. Pichu thought about it and returned to the villa. As soon as he entered the door, Jarvis's voice rang out. "Jarvis. Mr. Pickle, do you have a message for you, do you accept it?" Pichu. "Accept." Quote. Then Tony's voice rang out. "Hey, Pichu, I just took a look and found that there are still a lot of fruits bought by Xiao Chili in the refrigerator. If you want to eat, you can go to the refrigerator to find it yourself. Anyway, it's not once or twice." Quote. Of course, if you want to drink, I agree that you go to my wine cellar and drink whatever you want, as if you have become a loner these days and can't go with me to compensate for it. Quote. Hearing Tony's message, Pichu couldn't help but raise his right hand and rub his cheek, muttering in his heart. Sure enough, is this about to start the scattered wealth in the original plot? In the plot of Iron Man 2, Tony scattered his wealth because of palladium poisoning. Some modifications were made to Mark II, which would later become the War Machine, and licensed to Rhodes so that he could put on the armor and use it. It also made Little Pepper the CEO of Stark Group, and handed over the entire group to Little Pepper. This kind of behavior is completely arranging the aftermath. Thinking of this, Pichu returned to the room. Looking at the Pikachu armor placed next to the bed, Pichu took out a tablet that he hadn't used in a long time, well, the one specially made by S.H.I.E.L.D. Turning on the computer, Pichu finds the feature called Anti-Surveillance, and turns it on, then enters the internal network, finds Nick Fury's contact information, and sends a voice call. Toot toot. After waiting for half a minute or so, the call was connected, and then Nick Fury's voice came first. Pichu, why did you suddenly remember to contact me today? Is there anything wrong? Pichu, you've been spying on Tony. Quote. Oh, who said that? How, I don't know. Quote. Nick Fury's voice didn't change in any way, and he didn't seem to even be surprised, only confused. Sure enough, it's an old fox. Quote. Hearing Nick Fury's voice without any change, Pichu couldn't help but roll his eyes. If he hadn't known about it a long time ago, I'm afraid he would have been bluffed by Nick Fury. Sure enough, as an agent, and a head of the Secret Service, the lie can be described as coming out of his mouth. So he said angrily. Okay, who are you pretending to be stupid with here? I don't know you yet, not only slamming the door but also thinking a lot, and I don't know what I'm thinking about every day. Quote. 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 Nick Fury, who was in a base somewhere, had a black line on his face when he heard this. Sure enough, even if they haven't met and spoken for more than half a year, Pichu's mouth is still so uncomfortable. Tell me, what's the matter? Said Nick Fury, grimacing. Since Pichu was so sure, he didn't bother to hide it from Pichu. Yes, it's good to admit it at first. Quote. Pichu pursed his lips and said, and then got to the point. Do you know what's going on with Tony right now? Hearing this, Nick Fury, who was on the other side, narrowed his right eye and said in a deep voice, What's the matter? I haven't read Tony's recent surveillance report yet. Quote. Pichu, I know about the arc reactor. Quote. Nick Fury. Go on. Quote. Pichu. Arc reactor, Tony, he got this thing out that you haven't been able to get out of S.H.I.E.L.D. for so long. But because of Tony's continuous improvement, combined with his special situation, it has left a little sequelae. Quote. And the after effects of this can sometimes be fatal. Quote. Are you sure? Said Nick Fury's expression grew serious. Pichu smiled disdainfully. Of course, if I'm not sure, will I be here to talk nonsense with you? I see. Nick Fury replied, then asked, is there anything else you can do? No, by the way, don't reveal that I told you about this. Anyway, even if I don't say it, you monitor him and he will know about it soon. Pichu replied, and casually reminded him. Got it, since it's okay, hang up. Nick Fury said and ended the call. Looking at the end of the call, Pichu couldn't help but pout. Then he rubbed his cheeks and muttered, when the matter on Tony's side is over, I should also leave here for a while, and then go to Mexico to play with Thor. Quote. As an electric Pokemon, why don't you try to get a hammer and play with it? By the way, if I move Thor's hammer, will it attract the attention of Father Odin? Forget it, it's going to be a while anyway, let's talk about it. Quote. Instead of thinking about the mess, Pichu turned off his tablet, turned on the small reactor generator, and began to devour the power accumulation evolution points. Now he has almost 15 million evolution points, and he is still more than 80 million short of 100 million, and it will take nearly 3 years to accumulate. Author's note. Thanks to the monthly pass of Circle.Operator and Clouds in the Sky. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 61. In a large base belonging to S.H.I.E.L.D. After ending the conversation with Pichu, Nick Fury arrives in a room. Then log into his account and start checking out Tony's latest reports. After looking at it for a while, Nick Fury didn't notice anything wrong. After thinking about it, he used his authority to turn on the S.H.I.E.L.D. intelligence system, bypass Jarvis's detection, and began to view some of Tony's documents that were not very confidential. Of course, this concept is not very secretive, and it is only for S.H.I.E.L.D. With Jarvis here, even if it's just a general file, not everyone can view it. As for whether S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intelligence system can be compared to Jarvis, this can actually be seen from the fact that Nick Fury and Coulson bypassed Jarvis and entered the villa in the movie. Although Jarvis is strong, he still can't defeat S.H.I.E.L.D. At least that's the case with Jarvis in the early stages. Of course, this is not to say that SHIELD's intelligent systems far surpass Jarvis. They may only be half-hearted. In some small things, if one side is a little more hidden, and the other party has not been carefully checked, it is difficult to detect the other party's small movements. So what Nick Fury was looking at was just a few simple files. If he wanted to see the classified information of the iron armor, it would probably be discovered by Jarvis in a matter of seconds before he proceeded to break the clearance. Soon Nick Fury saw a report of Tony's blood tests. It shows metal poisoning and blood toxicity of 14%. I see. Seeing this test report, Nick Fury was thoughtful. A few messages were then edited and sent. Night falls, and the stars are shining. Let the time tick. 3 days later, the Stark Fair took place as scheduled. In the villa, Pichu came to the laboratory and let Jarvis release the scene footage. After all, it is the Stark Expo, not only the large number of people on site, but also the grand occasion of the Stark Expo can be seen on the internet after the real-time broadcast. Looking at Tony, who was filmed in the broadcast screen, Pichu couldn't help but show a look of contempt. Sure enough, Tony is still Tony. Although I can see him differently after I have a good relationship with him, some habits are still the same as before. After Pickle remembers, Tony seems to have gone on a trip to Washington. It's to attend a meeting about the Iron Warframe. It was as if the meeting was presided over by a counselor whose real identity was Hydra. It is estimated that the fight is to let Tony contribute the steel armor to the country on the surface, but in fact, he wants to secretly take back the technology of the steel armor to the attention of the Hydra behind. In front of so many multimedia and official personnel, in the face of people who coveted his steel armor, although Tony did not turn his face on the spot, he was also quite unkind. After the whole meeting, the faces of the officials turned a little dark. But they were helpless against Tony. I have to say that from Pichu's point of view, Tony's behavior at the meeting made him feel quite cool. For those with bad intentions, that's how it should be. He just likes the feeling of, you can't get used to me, but you can't kill me. Single quote quote. Looking at Tony's figure in the wind sow, Pichu asked Jarvis to turn off the live broadcast screen, then returned to the room, turned on the small reactor generator and began to draw electricity. It didn't take long for Jarvis's voice to suddenly sound. Mr. Pichu, sir has sent you a call. Quote. Plug it on. Hearing this, Pichu rubbed his cheek with his right hand. Hey, Pichu, it's so lively today, you just missed it like this, it's a pity, do you want to come to New York for a few days? As soon as it was connected, Tony's voice sounded with what seemed to be smiling. What's the matter? But Pichu was calm. Well, that's the... There seemed to be a slight pouting from there, and then Tony went straight to the point. I finally came to New York, but Potts didn't let me go for the time being, saying that I was the boss of the group, and asked me to stay for a few more days to help her handle the group's business, and I could leave when she hired a satisfactory secretary. Quote. So, I'm not afraid that you're too lonely to stay alone in the villa, why don't you come to New York, what do you think? There was a car race in Monaco some time ago, and the person in charge sent me an invitation, which I wanted to refuse, but now I plan to go and see it. Quote. After staying in the villa for so long, it's time to walk around. After all, life is too short, and there are so many interesting things in the world of flowers, we must know how to enjoy it in time. Quote. Hearing Tony's words, Pichu rubbed his cheek with his right hand and played with the arc, and muttered secretly in his heart. It seems to make some sense. If I hadn't known what your situation was, I'm afraid I would have believed your nonsense. Quote. Life is too short and you have fun in time, as if you didn't enjoy it in time. Quote. The best thing you should do now is confess to Pepper, okay? Quote. Although he complained in his heart, thinking of what happened next, Pichu still said. Well, since you have been invited so many times, if I refuse again, it will hurt your young heart. Quote. Fuck off. Hearing this, Tony over there couldn't help but laugh and scold, and then said. Now that you've decided, come here, by the way, it shouldn't be a problem to help me bring the Mark V, right? Good guy, It turns out that you are treating me as a coolie. Pichu couldn't help but complain. Tony immediately smiled and said, how can it be called coolies, and the weight of a set of Mark V is estimated to be about the same as a pebble for you. Quote. As for the divine power possessed by Pichu's body, although he didn't know the specific strength, he also knew that it was terrifying. All right, I see. Quote. Hearing this, Pichu pursed his lips. Tony. Then I'll be waiting for you in New York. Quote. After ending the call, Pichu turned off the small reactor generator, jumped directly on the bed, wrapped the small quilt specially bought by Xiao Pepper around his body, and began to fall asleep. Although it's okay if he doesn't sleep for more than half a month now, Pichu still sleeps under normal circumstances. After all, if you don't even have the interest in sleeping, then it's worth it. In the blink of an eye, it was the next day. The sun rises into the sky, the blue sky and white clouds, and the breeze is not appropriate. Pichu released lightning and walked around his body, and after a simple disinfection and hygiene, he put on a translator and went to the underground garage to find the suitcase armor, Mark V. Pichu activated the electromagnetic levitation skill, and after slowly floating, he stretched out his right hand to hook Mark V's handle. Pichu. Jarvis, open the door. Quote. Jarvis. Okay, Mr. Pichu. Quote. Carrying Mark V, who was older than him, Pickle flew out of the villa along the tunnel of the garage and flew towards the sky. After rising to a height of more than 50 meters, Pichu's mind moved, and he suddenly turned into a yellow streamer and flew out, and the speed instantly exceeded the speed of sound. However, because of the special electromagnetic field caused by the skill, in addition to causing a little wind and waves, it does not produce a sonic boom phenomenon such as the supersonic speed of the steel armor. Author's note. Thanks to the monthly passes of Butterfly of the Dark Wing and Bright Moon X of the Chin period. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 62. Manhattan, New York. After some twists and turns, Pickle finally arrives at Tony's villa in Manhattan. Why do you say that it has gone through a lot of twists and turns? Because when Pichu flew halfway, he suddenly found that he didn't seem to know the road very well. Although he knows which direction Manhattan is in, he doesn't know where Tony lives. Tony didn't tell him where he was, and he forgot to ask. Even when he left, he forgot to ask Jarvis for the address. It's noon, Pichu hasn't arrived yet, and when Tony is confused, he remembers that Pichu doesn't seem to know his detailed address yet, so he can only ask Jarvis to locate the translator. After all, the translator's program is also a sub-program of Jarvis, and if you really want to find it, you can still use the satellite to locate it through a certain connection. As for getting lost, Pichu said that he was indeed negligent. But fortunately, the problem is not very big. A single-family home in Midtown Manhattan. In the basement. Pichu threw the Mark V in his hand on the sofa casually, and couldn't help but complain. It's so hard, I can't imagine that I'll get lost one day. Quote. Look, that's a side effect of staying at home for too long, so it's the right thing to do this time to let you out, otherwise you wouldn't know you're going to get lost. Quote. Not far away, with the help of the mechanical arm, he took off the Mark IV on his body, and Tony immediately said something when he heard this, and a smug smile of, I know you are troubled, on his face. Ideographic period. Seeing this scene, Pichu couldn't help but roll his eyes. Looks like I need to write down a map or a geographical location or something. Fortunately, after 2 evolutions, his memory has reached the level of memorability, and it is not difficult for him to memorize these things. After a while, seeing that Tony had changed into a suit and tidied up his hairstyle, Pichu couldn't help asking. What are you going to do? Tony straightened his clothes, then picked up Mark V and said, Go to Stark Industrial Park, let's go, Harpy is already waiting outside. Quote. Hearing this, Pichu didn't say anything more, jumped off the sofa and walked outside. After coming outside, I found a car parked outside the villa, and Harpy, who was dressed in formal clothes, was standing there. Pichu looked at the car that Harpy was driving. Well, It looks like a Rolls-Royce, and he doesn't know what model it is. After all, before he crossed the border, Pichu was an ordinary person. I don't have any savings in a year, and I'm embarrassed to go home for the new year. I don't have the heart to understand these famous cars or anything. At most, I know some of the more famous brands from some things. For example, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Maserati, Rolls-Royce or something. Well, and of course Wuling Hongguang. After getting to the car, Harpy drove towards Stark Industrial Park. The Stark building, later the Avengers building, is still under construction and is still some time away from completion and use, so the headquarters of the Stark Group is still in the Stark Industrial Park. And Pepper also works in Stark Industrial Park every day. Stark Industrial Park. With Tony's lead, Pichu arrives in an office. Along the way, Pichu did not attract the attention of others. Arriving at the office, Pickle and Tony find Pepper, dressed in professional attire and wearing a ponytail, sitting behind a desk looking down at a file. Hearing the sound of the door opening, little Pepper said without raising his head, "Wait until I'm done with this document." Quote, "Potts, it's me and Pichu." Quote, looking down at Pichu, Tony called Pepper. "Tony." Quote. Hearing Tony's voice, Pepper immediately raised her head, and after seeing Tony and Pichu, she put down the documents in her hand, stood up and said with a smile as she walked out, "Why did Pichu come now? Did he get up late?" Quote. Quote. Pichu couldn't help but rub his cheek with his right hand. "Ha ha ha, that's the..." Tony smiled happily and told Pepper what had happened. That look, Pichu, who looked at it, wanted to give it to him. However, who knows, after Pepper knew the reason, she couldn't help but give Tony a blank look. "Tony, why are you so negligent? What if Pichu gets lost and encounters danger?" Forehead. Hearing this, Tony couldn't help but look at Pichu with strange eyes. With Pichu's ability, even if he is lost, who can still hurt him? Although he really wanted to talk to Pichu, he never took action. It's because the anti-lightning armor has not been successfully studied. He didn't want to use an ordinary battle armor to eat Pichu's lightning and experience the sensation of electric shock. After all, he's not a masochist either. All right, can you stop dwelling on this matter?" Quote. Hearing the conversation between the two, Pichu interrupted them by rubbing his cheeks with both hands. "It's completely black history or not?" "Okay." Quote. Pepper and Tony looked at each other and smiled. Tisk. Quote. Seeing this, Pichu couldn't help but pout. Is this a husband and wife? After that, Harpy took Pichu on a tour of Stark Industrial Park. As for Tony and Pepper, they were discussing work matters. Well, before leaving, Pichu seemed to hear Tony seem to be talking about some transfers. It seems that he is already talking to Pepper about making her CEO. In this way, Pichu spent the next few days playing around with Tony in New York. However, Pichu's interest was not high. First of all, it's not fun, and secondly, it's always a bunch of people staring outside. After a few days in New York, the group returned to their California villa. 6 days later. Villa in the gym. Pichu sat on the couch watching a movie, and from time to time grabbed a cherry or grape from a nearby fruit bowl and stuffed it into his mouth. Tony and Harpy practiced their martial arts skills in the ring, the center of the gym. Pepper walked in and said as he walked, "Tony, the notary has arrived, can you please come and sign the transfer agreement?" "I'm busy." Tony, who was sweating profusely, said. Then he used a new set of plays, and it was an elbow blow to the shield on Harpy's head. Harpy took a step back and looked at Tony with some confusion. "What trick are you?" "It's called mixed martial arts, and it's been popular for about 3 weeks, he says." Tony jumped lightly, thoughtful and replied. Noticing this scene, Pichu retracted his mind from the movie and looked at Tony and Harpy. It's all too familiar. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 63. Soon, the door opened again. A royal sister wearing a white short-sleeved shirt and black baggy trousers, holding a document in her left hand, walked into the fitness room with a charming smile on her face. A long brownish-red wavy hair was draped over his right shoulder and behind him, and the top two buttons of the white shirt on his upper body were not buttoned, and a touch of whiteness loomed. Seeing the familiar face of the visitor, Pichu knew that it was her. Natasha Romanoff, one of the 6 generations of Avengers, codenamed Black Widow by S.H.I.E.L.D., is a mortal danger beneath her beautiful, seductive appearance. It's been almost half a month since Tony's poison attack, and Nick Fury has also arranged Natasha, who has returned from a mission, into the legal department of Stark Group. After coming to the fitness room, Natasha quickly took the situation of the fitness room into her eyes without leaving a trace, and when she saw Pichu standing on the sofa staring at her, she was slightly stunned, but she still covered it up well. However, the sharp-eyed Pichu still found out. Although Natasha's disguise ability is outstanding, she can't escape the eyes of Pichu, who has reached 3 stars. After looking away from Pichu's expression, Natasha took the document to Pepper's side, then opened the transfer document to Pepper and signed it. In the ring, Harpy and Tony also set their sights on Natasha. After seeing Natasha, Tony was stunned for a moment, and then vaguely equated her with the personal assistant candidate he was going to choose later. It is undeniable that Natasha's appearance is very much in line with his or most Westerners' aesthetics. Even Pichu was amazed by Natasha before. The plot after that is basically the same as the plot of the movie. Natasha is called into the ring by Tony and then asks Harpy to teach her a few tricks. As for Tony, he came to Pepper's side, discussing with Pepper about his personal assistant, and using the holographic operation on the table next to him to search for Natasha's information. Wow, she's amazing. Tony was a little surprised to see Natasha's profile. Seeing Tony's actions, Pepper was speechless. Please, it's boring. Quote. Tony continued to flip through the material, slightly surprised. She's fluent in French, Italian, and Latin. Who speaks Latin? At the end, Tony couldn't help but look at Pepper. Nobody spoke Latin, a language that was about to disappear. Quote. Pepper looked at Tony with a helpless expression. At this time, Tony flipped through Natasha's photo, zoomed in on one of the photos. Tony raised his eyebrows and said, "Have you ever been a model in Tokyo?" No. Seeing this, Pepper looked a little strange. She's been there. I need her. She's good at everything. Looking at Natasha's profile, Tony couldn't help but say. Hearing this, little Pepper's face was a little ugly. Tony, on the other hand, was still looking at Natasha's profile, well, mostly staring at the pictures. Seeing this scene, Pichu, who was on the sofa next to him, couldn't help muttering in his heart, "Tony, is this really not discovered, or is it fake that he didn't find out? Can't you see that Pepper is a little unhappy? Isn't it? This is called bystander." With a blank look at Tony, Pichu set his eyes on the ring. At this time, Harpy saw Natasha turn her head to look at Tony and Pepper, and couldn't help but smile and said, "Then the first iron law, you must stare at the opponent." Quote. As he spoke, Harpy gently punched Natasha with his right fist. However, just as Harpy was in control, Natasha suddenly turned around, grabbed Harpy's right fist with her left hand and twisted it, and then forcefully caused Harpy to stagger under his feet. Immediately afterwards, Natasha grabbed Happy's arm and borrowed force, and her legs instantly clamped Happy's neck, and then directly threw Happy to the ground. His legs were still tightly clasped around Harpy's neck, and his hands were also locked on Harpy's right hand. Oh my God! Seeing what happened in the ring, Tony and Pepper exclaimed in unison, especially Pepper was even more shocked. He didn't expect Natasha to be so strong. As Tony's bodyguard and driver, Harpy used to be a boxer, and his fighting strength was far beyond the average person. However, now he was defeated by Natasha's move. By the way, the name that Tony and Pepper know is Natalie Rochman. Seeing this scene, Pichu couldn't help but want to laugh in his heart. When I first watched the movie, Pichu laughed when I saw this scene. At the same time, I was also a little surprised by Natasha. After a while, Tony pressed his fingerprint on the transfer document. Taking the papers, Natasha smiled and said, "Is there anything else, Mr. Stark?" Before Tony could speak, Pepper smiled and said, "It's okay, Miss Rochman." Quote. "Good." Quote. Natasha smiled and nodded, then left with the transfer papers. Watching Natasha leave, Tony looked at Pepper. "I'm going to have this." "No, I can't." Before Tony could speak, he was interrupted by a smiling little Pepper. Tony choked a little. "Tut tut." Seeing this scene, Pichu couldn't help pouting, and then refocused on the movie. "It's okay now. Wait a few days to go to Monaco, wait for Ivan Vanko, Whip to show up, and then you can ask Nick Fury to take what Howard left behind to Tony." Then he took the opportunity to mention him and let him understand Howard's hard work in advance. As for the later acting to let Rod take Mark II and have an awkward relationship with Pepper because of self-abandonment and unclear explanation, Pichu felt that this kind of thing didn't need to happen. If it weren't for the fact that it wasn't easy to explain to Tony, Pichu had already told Tony bluntly some time ago that the key point of the new element was in the future city model that your father left you. With 1 day to go before the start of the Monaco Grand Prix, Pichu, Tony, Pepper and Harpy sailed on a private jet to Monaco in the south of France. Monaco is a city-state in Europe, one of the few national celestial empires, and the second smallest country in the world. Author's note. 120,000 words, it's time for me to ask the editor about the shelves. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 65. The racing race was held on time. When the organizers announced that Tony was also participating in the racing competition, the whole field was boiling. Even the racers were thrilled. Because if they win Tony, they will definitely go out and brag and pretend to be a capital. Maybe it can be used to flirt with girls, and it can also greatly increase the success rate. And it is in this high-profile situation. A corner. Justin Hammer stood there, with 2 physically fit bodyguards behind him. Looking at the starting point of the track on the big screen, Justin Hammer placed his left hand in front of him, his right elbow on the back of his left hand, and his index finger and thumb gently pinched his chin in a pensive look. He really couldn't figure out why Tony was going to a dangerous racing race. People of their status should only be on the stage, as a spectator watching the play. If you get involved in racing, if you have an accident, it's probably over. If it were him, he would not have put himself in danger. While wondering about Tony's behavior, a slightly terrifying thought popped up in his mind. That's hoping that Tony will have an accident while racing. As the second largest arms dealer in the United States, Hammer Industries has always been overwhelmed by the Stark Group. Later, after Tony closed the weapons manufacturing division, Hammer Industries entered into a strategic partnership with the Ministry of Defense, so Hammer Industries continued to move forward. Meanwhile, in a no-man's corner, Natasha, who was separated from Pichu and them, took her phone to report to Nick Fury. "Sir, Pickle also followed Tony Stark to Monaco, and appeared in front of many people, and I found that many people had thoughts about him." Quote. There was silence on the other side. Then Nick Fury's helpless voice sounded. "I know, give me a list when the time comes, and I'll have someone talk to them." Quote. Natasha. "Yes, sir." Quote. After the call, Natasha looked at the first auditorium at the starting point, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. Base. Nick Fury sent a directive to the task force responsible for Pichu's security in the first place, telling them to keep an eye on the internet for information about Pichu. Anyway, they can delete it, and then let them prepare a few people, wait for his latest order to set off, and talk to some people. Monaco. Bang. With a single gunshot, all the cars on the track, the engines let out a powerful roar, and then rushed out of the starting line one by one. Many people in the audience were cheering excitedly. And was held by Pepper. Well, it's not so much about holding it, it's better to say that Pichu, who is holding it with both hands, is checking the entrances to the track at this time, trying to find Ivan Vanke. But there are too many people here, and it's very noisy. So after looking for a while, Pichu didn't find it. I could only wait for Ivan Vanke himself to come out of the audience and appear on the runway. Time passes slowly. When the first lap was more than half gone, something unexpected happened. I saw such a scene in the footage of the camera in charge of broadcasting. A man in yellow overalls opened the iron door next to him without the attention of a nearby staff, and then walked directly into the track of the racing car. Then I saw that the clothes on his body fell off automatically, revealing what looked like an exoskeleton inside, and he held two long whips in his hands. White lightning pulsed on the two whips. Seeing that person, I don't know what's going on. Xiao Pepper, who has been very worried, felt a stronger bad premonition in her heart at this time, and hurriedly looked at Harpy on the side. Harpy's brow furrowed slightly, his instincts telling him that something was likely to happen. So Harpy nodded, and was about to go out with Pepper, and they were ready to go to the car, and then get Mark 5 ready to be sent to Tony at any time. As for Pichu, he was naturally taken along by little Pepper. In the picture. Soon, the first car approached, and when it spotted the man, it immediately turned to the right, trying to get around him. However, under everyone's gaze, I saw that the man waved the whip in his right hand fiercely, and directly cut off the front end of the approaching car. Then, under the action of inertia, the car flew forward for nearly 20 meters and smashed to the ground. Many parts fell apart directly, and more firelight faintly emerged from above. What was a good race car a few seconds ago is now almost a pile of scrap metal. As for the racers in the car, I'm afraid the end won't be any better. Most of the people who saw this scene couldn't help but let out an exclamation. Pepper and Harpy heard the exclamation and subconsciously turned to look at the big screen of the broadcast. Then I saw the frightening scene in the picture. Quick, Harpy. Seeing this scene, Xiao Pepper's expression changed greatly, and he hurriedly said a word, turned around and ran outside. Harpy hurriedly caught up and ran ahead to clear the way for Pepper. Whiplash, Ivan Vanko. And Pichu, who was held by little Pepper, couldn't help but squint his eyes when he saw the picture on the big screen. This guy used the low-speed arc reactor he built, plus his own ideas, to make a set of high-tech electric shock whips, which are also very powerful. With a wave of his hand and a whip of the electric whip, the car can be neatly cut in half, which shows its great attack power. Although the attack power is very strong, as long as you don't get hit, you'll be fine. And in Pichu's opinion, Ivan Vanko has too many weaknesses. Soon Harpy, Pepper, and Pichu are in the car. Harpy then drove straight into the Rolls-Royce and crashed through the road gate, then broke into the track, and went up the track in the opposite direction, making a quick drive towards Tony's position. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 66. Little Pepper, is this too worried and anxious to forget my ability? In the car, Pichu saw little Pepper with an anxious and worried face in the rearview mirror, and was a little speechless. In fact, he wanted to fly directly over before. But he ran away when he was hugged by little Pepper, and he didn't break free for fear of hurting little Pepper. Later, he was carried by Pepper and ran away for a while, thinking that Tony would not be able to die for a while. Pichu didn't bother to remind Pepper that he was actually very strong, and he could go first. Even now Pichu doesn't want to make a move. Judging from the plot development of the current world line closure, if there is no accident anyway, Tony can completely kill Ivan Vanki. Even if there is a real accident under the so-called butterfly effect, seeing that the situation is not right, he can reach it in a few seconds with his strength to turn on high-speed movement. If Tony knew Pichu's thoughts, he would definitely call out for carelessness in dating. Soon, the figures of Tony and Ivan Vanki appeared in the eyes of several people. Tony collapsed next to a wrecked race car in embarrassment. Ivan Vanki stood in front of him with two electric whips in his hand, and slowly raised the electric whip in his right hand, ready to whip it at Tony lying on the ground in front of him. Harpy. Seeing this scene, Pepper was so frightened that she couldn't help but let out a loud shout. Sit tight. Harpy's eyes narrowed slightly, and he slammed on the accelerator, and the Rolls-Royce rushed towards Ivanko. Ivan Vanki, who was about to lash Tony, heard the movement behind him, turned sharply to look behind him, and then saw the rushing Rolls-Royce. His expression changed, and he just wanted to fight back, but it was too late. Just like the original plot, Ivan Vanki was directly hit by Rolls-Royce against the iron fence wall in the rear. Tony, are you all right? The frightened Pepper hurriedly looked at Tony, who had gotten up from the ground. "I'm fine." Tony was also a little shocked. He didn't expect such a person to suddenly run out. If he hadn't reacted fast enough, I'm afraid he would have been killed by him. Thinking like this, Tony looked towards Ivan Vanko in front of him. Then I saw Pichu, who opened the window at some point and came outside from the car. I saw Pichu quickly come to Ivan Vanki, and stretched out his hand to Ivan Vanki, who was lying on the front of the car, and punched him lightly in the head. With a punch, Ivan Vanko let out a scream, stopped pretending to be dead, straightened up like a carp, and then collapsed on the front cover of the car again. Ivan Vanki was lying on the front cover of the car and twitching slightly, basically no threat, because he was almost not concussed because he was punched by Pichu. This is still the reason why Pichu controls his strength, otherwise Ivan Vanki's head will bang with a little force, and a bunch of white and red tofu brains will explode. What do you dare to do? Seeing Pichu's actions, Tony, Pepper, and Harpy were shocked. Will it be mended? Hearing this, Pichu turned his head to look at them and said lightly. Then he used his left hand to prop up Ivan Vanko, who was about to lose consciousness with gentle convulsions, and with his right hand he pulled it into his chest, and detained the low-speed arc reactor. Well done. Seeing this scene, Tony frowned, and then gave Pichu a thumbs up. Then he came to the front of the car, took the arc reactor from Pichu's hand, and couldn't help but fall silent. Tony. Pepper walked out, glanced cautiously at Ivan Vanko, and then looked at Tony with some puzzlement. It's fine. Quote. Tony smiled and shook his head, then put the reactor in a Rolls-Royce. At this time, the local police finally arrived. Seeing this, Harpy hurriedly drove the Rolls-Royce backwards and asked them to catch Ivan Vanko. In a corner, Justin Hammer, who had been watching the scene through the big screen, looked at Ivan Vanko, who was taken away by the police, and the corners of his mouth were raised, showing a smile. Well, it's the villain's smile. After such a thing as Ivan Vanki, whether it is Tony or Pepper, neither of them is in the mood to continue to stay in Monaco at this time. So after Tony briefly treated his injuries, Harpy drove away with a few people and rushed in the direction of the airport. Time passes slowly. On the same day, Pichu and the others returned to the California villa. Meanwhile, after receiving Natasha's report, Nick Fury quickly checked the relevant information of Ivan Vanko. Finally, he took his things with him, and Coulson and a few other agents accompanied him as he headed towards Tony's villa. As for Natasha, without the donut in the original episode, Nick Fury did not intend to expose her, but let her continue to work undercover in the Stark group. In his opinion, it is impossible for Pichu to know Natasha, so it is perfectly fine. It's past 11 o'clock in the evening. Villa Underground Laboratory. Tony will get the clarity of the reactor analysis from Ivan Vanko. His expression was full of solemnity and doubt. This is indeed an arc reactor, although the technical aspect is not very good. It is just a low-speed reactor, but it is definitely a 100% arc reactor. He wondered, how exactly did Ivan Vanko get this reactor out? At this time, he had not found out the relevant information about Ivanko's father. Tony. Quote. At this time, Pichu came to the laboratory. Seeing Tony and then looking at the relevant information of the arc reactor and Ivan Vanko, he couldn't help but say. Isn't it surprised? It's a little. Quote. Tony didn't deny it either, nodded and said. I really didn't expect that there would be someone other than me who could build the arc reactor, although he can't compare with mine in terms of quality, but it is indeed the arc reactor. Quote. I'm more confused, where did his technology come from? I know that. Quote. Pichu jumped onto the workbench and rubbed her cheek with her right hand to look at Tony. You know. Hearing this, Tony was stunned for a moment, and then looked at Pichu in some surprise. Well, it was the boiled egg that told me. Quote. Pichu nodded and said, I heard him say that Ivan Vanki's father still has a lot of relationships with your father. Wait for him to explain it to you, he should be on his way here now. Quote. Ivan Vanko's father. Tony couldn't help but frown. Jarvis, check the information of Ivanko's father. Quote. After a while. Jarvis. Sir, Ivanko's father is called Anton Vanki. According to the information, Anton Vanki was a physical scientist in the Russian Federation, but then somehow went to Siberia and died more than a month ago. Quote. Jarvis. Sir, I found out that some of Anton Vanki's data has been erased. Do you try to restore it? Don't. It for now. Hearing this, Tony looked at Pichu and thought that Nick Fury had stopped continuing to investigate. It seems that when Nick Fury arrives, he should tell him what happened, and there is no need to waste time for Jarvis to try to recover the data. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 67. The next day, it was just dawn. Nick Fury took Coulson and the others to the villa. With the exception of Coulson, who followed Nick Fury into the villa, the other agents were all on guard and waiting outside. Villa living room. Nick Fury and Tony sit facing each other. Coulson stood behind Nick Fury, while Pichu stood on the coffee table. What do you have to say? Looking at Nick Fury, Tony grimaced slightly. Nick Fury shifted his gaze from Pichu to Tony, and with a look on his face that seemed to be a smile but not a smile, he spoke. What do you want to know? All. Tony leaned back, looking at Nick Fury with the same expression. Okay. Nodding, Nick Fury spoke slowly. That thing on your chest is actually based on unfinished technology. Quote. Not finished. Tony frowned slightly. No, it's a finished product, but I shrunk it to make it work. Quote. No. Nick Fury shook his head and said. Your dad said that the arc reactor was just a springboard for greater technology, and that he was going to start an energy competition that would leave all his opponents in the dust. Quote. He had a clue about a super energy, and the nuclear reactor was like a 3A battery in comparison. Quote. Hearing this, Tony's expression changed slightly, and he was surprised and a little puzzled in his heart. Super energy. The nuclear reactor is just a 3A battery compared to it. You must know that in today's arc reactor, the energy of one piece is converted into electricity, which is enough to use New York for several months or a year. The small reactor generator made for Pichu, until now, Pichu has not even consumed 1/5 of his energy, which shows the huge amount of energy. After frowning, Tony asked. Is he the only one? Anton Vanki is also involved, right? Anton Vanki. Nick Fury smiled slightly, gestured and said, he is like the other side of the copper plate. He thinks it is the way to make a fortune, so when your father found out, he expelled him. Quote. When he returned, Lao Russo, when he found him useless, sent him to Siberia, where for 20 years he lived a life of alcoholism and cynicism. Quote. Ivan Vanki, the person who attacked you in Monaco is his son. You also know that a person's growth is inseparable from the surrounding environment, plus Anton Vanki died a few days ago, so. Speaking of which, Nick Fury spread his hands, and Tony naturally understood what he meant. Just because Anton Vanki is dead, Ivan Vanki, who knows his itinerary, attacked him in Monaco and wanted to kill him for revenge or something. And he suddenly went to participate in a racing competition, which naturally gave him a good opportunity to do it. After a moment of silence, thinking of his previous words, Tony frowned and asked. What do you mean when you say I haven't tried them all, and what else haven't I tried? Oh. Nick Fury looked at Tony and said. Your father, he said, well, he said, that you only have the wisdom and the knowledge to accomplish the plan he started. Quote. What did he say? Tony raised an eyebrow slightly. Quote. Nick Fury nodded, then looked at Tony and asked. Is that you? If it's you, then you'll be able to solve the mystery of your mind. With that, Nick Fury stared into Tony's eyes. Tony's expression changed slightly. He shook his head after gritting his teeth slightly, and said as if he was a little sad and unwilling. I don't know how you know that, but he's not really sure about me. Quote. What do you remember about your dad? Nick Fury looked at Tony, and the gaze in his right eye was very deep. 10 minutes later, Nick Fury left with Coulson. All they left behind was the box with Howard's stuff in it. There were videos of Howard in it, as well as blueprints for the arc reactor and so on. In the laboratory. As Pickle stood on a nearby platform, Tony retrieved the projector he used to treasure the collection and opened Howard's videotape. Pichu, what do you think my dad thinks? While the tape was playing, Tony suddenly spoke, but his eyes kept on the screen. Listening to Howard's voice in the tape, his expression was flat. But if you look closely, you will find that there seems to be some sadness in his blandness. Pichu on the side heard this, and after being slightly silent, he said, "Although I don't know much, I think except for a few exceptions, there are few fathers in the world who don't like their children, but they are not good at expressing themselves." Quote, "There may have been some misunderstanding between you and your father." Quote, "Tony, you can take a good look at what your father left you, and there may be the answer." Quote, Quote, Tony nodded lightly when he heard this. His expression did not change much, and he did not continue to say anything. The two of them watched the video quietly. As the footage continued to play back, the two soon saw the end of the tape. That's the scene where Howard says what he most wants to say to Tony. Howard on the screen, leaning on the model of the future city behind him, his eyes seemed to span time and space, and he saw Tony today, and said slowly, "Tony, you're too young to understand yet, so I took this one for you first." Quote, "It's all made for you, and one day you'll understand that this is not just a human invention, it's my life's work, it's the key to the future." Quote, when the sound comes here, the picture shows a model of the futuristic city in the rear. Looking at the close-up of the future city model given in the picture, Tony's expression changed slightly, and something seemed to be emerging in his mind, but he couldn't grasp it for a while. Then the screen cuts back to Howard, and the voice continues. "I'm limited by the technology of my time, but one day you'll understand all of this, and then you'll change the world, and my greatest creations will always be you." Quote, listening to the last sentence that was slowly spoken, looking at Howard who was smiling slightly in the picture, Tony didn't know why, he only felt that his nose was a little sour. He finally heard it. But he didn't hear it until so many years later. Nowadays, time has passed, and things are not people. Looking at the picture that had stopped being shown, Tony fell silent, his hands clenched together at some point. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 68. Pichu, who was on the side, saw this scene and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. When he first watched the movie, he was a little moved when he saw this scene. Is Howard sure Tony? Absolutely. As Howard said at the end, his greatest creation was Tony. His life's work, the arc reactor, was nothing more than a gift he left to Tony. After all, it was because of improper communication, coupled with the personalities of the two, that caused their relationship to be very stiff. Maybe Howard is the kind of father who belongs to the strict father. Even if Tony is his pride, he still won't show it on the surface, only the majestic and best side in front of Tony. Coupled with Howard's sunere and not good at words personality, it is basically impossible for him to say what is in his heart in front of Tony. And Tony undoubtedly inherited Howard's character. In the original plot, Tony went to the company to find Pepper to explain and apologize, and then clear up the misunderstanding and reconcile the two. But because he was not good at words, he didn't say the truest thoughts in his heart for a long time. Now that the plot has changed a lot, Pichu doesn't have to worry about Tony and Pepper having an awkward relationship. Tony. Quote. At this moment, Pichu interrupted Tony's musings with a loud voice. Coming back to his senses, Tony looked at Pichu with some doubts. Looking at Tony, Pichu pretended to have a thoughtful expression and said, "That's right. When I just looked at the close-up of the future city model, I realized that the architectural furnishings of the future city model seemed to contain some information." Quote, then I thought about what your father said, and I think that the super energy clues that your father discovered may be hidden in it. You can think about it. Quote, where did you put the model of the city of the future? Super energy, new elemental. Hearing this, Tony also suppressed his previous thoughts, and then frowned slightly and thought about all the clues. Thinking of the close-up given in the picture just now, Tony's mind flashed with inspiration. Don't. Let's go, Pichu. Thinking of a certain guess, Tony suddenly stood up and said to Pichu, with a touch of expectation and joy on his face, and hurriedly walked outside. Pichu didn't ask anything, just followed. Arriving at the garage, Tony drives a silver-white convertible sports car towards the airport with Pichu. A few hours later, Stark Industrial Park. Pichu and Tony arrive in the CEO's office. Under Pepper's bewildered gaze, Tony asks Harpy to help him move several futuristic city models stacked in the corner and covered with a cloth to the car, and then spend a few more hours back at the villa. In the laboratory, Tony put together a model of the future city divided into 4 pieces, and then said, "Jarvis, scan, I'm going to get a working projection." Quote. Jarvis. "Yes, sir." Quote. Then the blue light flashes on the model of the future city. After a while, it appears that, "Scan complete," is a holographic projection font. An operational holographic projection of a futuristic city model slowly rises. Tony reached out and grabbed the model, then stepped aside, and the holographic projection enlarged and rotated. Looking at the circle in the center of the holographic projection of the futuristic city model, Tony thought to himself, "This looks like something to think, a bit like an atomic. And the nucleus should be here." Then Tony began to work on the holographic projection as if he were selfless. Pichu looked at the side and didn't make a sound. Silently left the laboratory and returned to the living room. Anyway, just wait for Tony to follow the clues left by Howard to get the new reactor out. After returning to the living room, Pichu thought about it, went to the kitchen, first took out a bottle of Coke from the refrigerator, then took out a plate of fruit, and returned to the living room to the sofa. Pichu. Jarvis, turn on the TV. Quote. Jarvis. Okay, Mr. Pichu. Quote. Then the large screen color TV hanging on the wall was controlled by Jarvis to turn on, and an action blockbuster movie played automatically. In order to watch the movie, Pickle also asked Jarvis to make a playlist. After watching one, switch to the next one on your own. If you encounter something that doesn't look good, Pichu says skip it, and Jarvis will switch to the next one. That's not a big deal for Jarvis. Then the painting style of the villa corresponds to the poles. Tony below is frowning slightly, trying to use his brain, studying the clues in the model that can extract new elements. And Pichu on it is a relaxed face drinking drinks, eating fruits and watching movies. Hey, Pichu, I figured it out. In less than 10 minutes, Tony's excited voice sounded in Pichu's ears. Then I saw Tony trotting to the living room, striding to Pichu's side, with a look of excitement and anticipation on his face, and said to Pichu, "I didn't expect my dad to be dead for 20 years, and he even taught me a lesson." Quote. Quote. Pichu nodded, looked at the TV without looking back, and said, "I know, now that you've found it, you can get it quickly." Quote. Forehead. Seeing Pichu like this, Tony was not only speechless, but then said, "Aren't you going to help me? If you want me to help, it's really, to say it earlier." Pichu couldn't help but glance at Tony, and said with an expression of, "You didn't say it earlier." "If you had said it earlier, I wouldn't have known, wouldn't have it." "If I had known, I would have helped you," you said. Quote. Why didn't you say it earlier? Hearing this, Tony's face was black, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help twitching slightly. Why can Pichu's mouth say so much? The good mood that finally came to life turned out to be almost gone now. Jarvis, please pause, thanks. Quote. Speaking to Jarvis, Pickle looked at Tony with disdain. Didn't you say that you want me to help? What are you going to do quickly? Is it a demolition? But I think that this kind of thing should be found in Airha. Quote. Stop, stop, stop. Tony only felt his scalp tingle, and quickly interrupted Pichu and said, to extract the new elements, you need to get a new element extraction device, so you need to make a small modification to the house, and it takes a lot of electricity to activate the device, which happens to be the same for your small reactor generator. Quote. Okay. Quote. Pichu nodded, then looked around. Say, where do you want me to dismantle? It's all said that it's not to demolish the house. Hearing this, Tony couldn't help but smile helplessly. Author's note. Thanks to the Immortal Mushroom and the Mountain Forge for the monthly pass. It's the first time I've put it on the shelves, and I don't have much experience, and it's a sudden launch, so it's a bit of a rush. I heard that the full subscription represents the trust between the author and the reader, and I am here to weekly ask for the full order thanks to the 2 readers of the full subscription. Thank you very much. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 69. After a while, Tony stood somewhere in the living room, pointed to the ground and said, Pichu, come on, can you make a hole here about 20 centimeters in diameter? I'll try. Quote. Pichu looked at it, replied in his mouth, and then came to the designated position. Make a fist with your right hand, aim at the position, and throw a punch at the ground. Well, almost a third of the force was used. Nearly 1/3 of 100 tons, that's also a huge force of 33 tons. With a snort, Pichu's right hand sank into the ground, and then directly pierced the floor. He pulled out his hand and punched down the hole to the side. 5 punches later, a hole the size of a soccer ball appeared. Tony complimented Pichu when he saw the hole he had smashed, and then put a few high-powered cables that had been connected to the small reactor generator into the hole. Let's go to the lab. After dropping the cable, Tony greeted and strode towards the staircase. Pichu followed. After arriving at the lab, Tony didn't ask Pickle to help this time, but instead used a hammer to smash a fence and make a hole the size of a basketball. Tony then went to the material vault and took out the pipes needed to transmit the energy from the chest. More than half an hour later, looking at Tony's new elemental extraction device, Prism Accelerator, Pichu had some anticipation in his heart. The new elemental reactor, which is a reactor with space energy as its core, contains and produces terrifying energy, providing more possibilities for the steel suit designed by Tony later. Phew, ready, I'm going to start, it's time to witness history. Quote. Arriving at the control valve, Tony looked at Pichu and said, then tried to twist the control valve to divert the energy rays inside the Prism Accelerator. However, it didn't twist after a while. Sir, you've reached the maximum energy, Jarvis reminded. Got it. Quote. Picking up the big wrench in front of the platform, Tony gritted his teeth and riveted enough to twist the control valve. The Azure laser beam cut a deep hole in the wall, and then, under Tony's control, slowly headed towards the triangular arc made of vibranium fixed not far away. As the laser beam shines on the vibranium triangle, a chemical reaction is created between the mysterious and powerful energy and the vibranium triangle, thus carrying out a qualitative transformation. Buzz buzz. The workbench trembled slightly, mixed with blue-white light emanating from the vibranium triangle. 5 seconds later, Tony quickly turned off the Prism Accelerator and looked at the vibranium triangle with a nervous and expectant look on his face. The light gradually converges. Soon, a vibranium triangle arc emitting a crystal white light appeared in Tony and Pichu's field of vision. The whole body is crystal clear, as if it is some kind of crystal product. However, this is a key point. A core that incorporates new elements. Glancing at Pichu, Tony came to the workbench, picked up the fixed vibranium triangle arc with tweezers, and looked at it carefully in front of him, with a smile on his face. Stepping aside, Tony placed the vibranium triangle into a reactor built specifically for him. With the insertion of the vibranium triangle, the reactor became operational. Jarvis. Sir, the reactor is compatible with the new elements, is it going to be tested? Test it now. Quote. Hearing Jarvis's inquiry, Tony didn't hesitate. Jarvis. Yes, sir. Quote. After another glance at the brand new triangular vibranium reactor, Tony looked at Pichu and couldn't help but say. Pichu, thank you. Quote. Well, thank me for what? Hearing this, Pichu looked at him with some doubts. Tony, if you hadn't reminded me, I probably wouldn't have known how long it would have taken me to discover the secrets, and I wouldn't have been able to work on a brand new reactor so quickly. Quote. I see. Quote. Pichu nodded suddenly, then shook his right hand and said. Actually, you don't need to thank me, I just found something by accident. Even without me, you can still find clues to new elements from it. Quote. Anyway, thank you. Quote. Tony smiled and said. Tell me, is there anything you want? Like my treasured wine, whatever you want to drink. Quote. In his opinion, it was because of Pichu's guidance that he was able to discover the clues of the new elements so smoothly, and then successfully extract the new elements. The successful extraction of the new element means that his life is guaranteed. Therefore, this can be regarded as a life-saving grace. What do you want? Hearing this, Pichu rubbed his cheeks, looked at the triangular vibranium reactor that was being tested by Jarvis, and said, How about giving me a whole one? I feel that this new element should be of great help to me, and maybe it can accelerate my growth. Quote. Can. Hearing this, Tony turned his head to look at the vibranium reactor, did not hesitate, nodded and said, I'll go and prepare the vibranium triangle arc, and then get one for you. Quote. Thanks. Quote. Pichu sincerely thanked him. With the vibranium reactor, he can directly absorb the energy inside and convert it into evolution points. Moreover, the strength of the energy in it can barely reach the origin level. Small meaning. Quote. Tony said a word, and then went to make the vibranium triangle. Vibranium is precious, and even he doesn't have much here. But since it was for Pichu, he didn't have any reluctant thoughts. 10 minutes later, Tony, who made the vibranium triangle, did the same, successfully activating the second new element, the vibranium triangle. Then another reactor was made and the vibranium triangle arc was put into it. Everything fell into place, and a second vibranium reactor was born. And at this time, Jarvis's voice also sounded. Sir, the new element reactor has been tested and is responding well. It will not cause any adverse effects on your body. You can replace the reactor. Quote. Good news, Jarvis. Quote. Hearing this, Tony handed the vibranium reactor in his hand to Pichu, and then took the first vibranium reactor out of the tester. Then he lifted his clothes, revealing the palladium reactor on his chest. Pichu glanced at it. I saw black veins centered on the location where the reactor was installed, spreading around, and Tony's chest was almost occupied by black veins. Removing the elemental palladium reactor, Tony took a deep breath and loaded the triangular vibranium reactor into it. Author's note. Thank you for the 100-point tip from Night Starry. Thank you for the 100-point reminder of 104,095,553. The subscription results don't seem to be ideal. Alas, more than 30,000 V receipts, although I don't know how big the water is. But look at the number of subscribers to the chapters on the shelves. The difference between before and after is too big. I don't know if it's abandoned after reading the first chapter on the shelves. Or save it. I guess it's a little too bad for me to write. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 70. Buzz buzz. As the vibranium reactor was loaded, Tony's face gradually changed, and he seemed a little uncomfortable, and then a little comfortable. Maybe it's called pain and happiness. Tony didn't hold back a cough, his chest rose and fell violently, and he sighed. It's a bit like a coconut, and there's a metallic. Wow, what a... In the end, Tony couldn't help but scream, with a comfortable look on his face. Ignoring Tony's shouts, Pichu looked at his chest. I saw that the vibranium reactor bloomed with a slightly more intense blue-white light, and those black veins on Tony's chest quickly disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. Apparently it was the vibranium reactor that purified his body of metal toxicity while it was operating. The birth of the vibranium reactor symbolizes Tony's second metamorphosis. The first time was after the kidnapping. After a while, everything was calm again, and Tony gasped for air, as if he had just been suffocating him for a while. The vibranium reactor in his chest had returned to its original state, shimmering with a faint blue-white glow. Wow, that's cool. Quote. Coming back to his senses, Tony couldn't help but look at Pichu with excitement and said, It's a pity that Pichu can't experience this feeling. It's really too comfortable. Do you know that feeling? It's like a larva turning into a butterfly and being reborn. I don't know, but I feel like I've just been reborn. Quote, "This feeling makes me feel like the thyroid hormones in my body are boiling." Quote. Hearing this, Pichu was a little speechless in his heart, but he was still happy to see Tony, who was so excited. "No, I can't help it, I'm going to go out and vent." Quote. At this point, Tony suddenly pursed his lips and said something that would be slightly misleading. Pichu's ears twitched, and he couldn't help but squint at Tony. Vent. Tony didn't notice Pichu's expression at this time, and immediately said after putting down his clothes, "Jarvis, quick, assemble the steel suit, I'm going to fly like a bird in the sky." Quote. Jarvis. "Yes, sir." Quote. At the steel suit wearing table not far away, the nearby intelligent robotic arm began to move, preparing all the parts of the Mark IV steel suit in the wearing table. Tony arrives at the table, raises his hands diagonally, and begins to put on the Mark IV iron suit. As the mechanical sound of clicking continued to sound, Tony had finished putting on the Mark IV steel suit after more than 10 seconds, and then put his hands on both thighs, palms squared towards the ground. Poof! A slightly yellowish beam of flame erupted from the palm of the steel suit. Then the next moment, Tony slammed into the sky. The head slammed into the floor, almost missing the entire floor above. Lean. Startled, Tony hurriedly turned off the flight function, and then the whole person fell from it again, slamming into the ground, smashing countless cracks on the ground. Then Tony lay on the ground stunned, still a little unconscious. "I'm laughing to death, ha ha ha." Seeing this scene, Pichu couldn't help laughing. Is this the legendary, handsome for 3 seconds? It's really a bit of a thing. Looking at Tony lying on the ground, Pichu smiled and couldn't help but say, "Tony, please give me another performance, I'll give me a cherry, I just beg you to perform again, I haven't seen enough of such a wonderful performance." Tony, who came back to his senses, heard Pichu's laughter and words, his face couldn't help but darken, and he felt embarrassed in his heart. His dignified Tony Stark, the handsome representative, turned out to be so humiliating. He didn't feel terrible about losing face, but the most terrible thing is that when you lose face, there are people next to you. Getting up from the ground, Tony ignored Pichu's ridicule, and said with a dark face, "Jarvis, what just happened? The iron warframe is out of control, and this kind of thing has only happened when Mark II was researched. Later, the experience became more mature, and this kind of thing never happened again. Now it's the 4th generation, and this kind of thing will still happen." This made him feel very embarrassed, and the face of the super genius was lost. "Jarvis. Sir, the new reactor has 100 times more energy supply than the old reactor, so with the configuration of the Mark IV suit, it needs to be optimized to adapt." Quote. And this stubble, I didn't even think of. Hearing Jarvis's answer, the corners of Tony's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but be a little speechless in his heart. Speaking of which, he was too excited. Because of the successful extraction of new elements and the solution of the threat of death, it was forgotten for a moment that the energy contained in the new vibranium reactor was not comparable to the previous one. And then that led to the scene just now. It looks like it's time to start working on the 6th generation of Mark. Walking towards the table, an idea popped into Tony's head. Mark VI, in his design concept, is the anti-lightning warframe, which is in addition to the basic capabilities of the steel warframe, but also has the functions of defending against lightning attacks and absorbing lightning energy. He didn't want to use it to deal with Pichu, and he also told Pichu about it, and Pichu expressed his disdain for it. Well, it can't be said that it wasn't used to deal with Pichu at all. The main thing is that he wants to have a fight with Pichu. Pichu's ability is to control lightning, so if he wants to fight with Pichu, he must be prepared to a certain extent. At the very least, it must be able to resist electricity, right? "Tony, I'll go first." Quote. On the other side, Pichu shook his head, said to Tony, and then held the second vibranium reactor in front of him with both hands and walked in the direction of the door. "Okay." Quote. Hearing this, Tony turned his head to look at Pichu, then pursed his lips and muttered, "I remember the ridicule just now, HMPH, When I get Mark 6 out, I will definitely give you a shot. Quote. After muttering, Tony took off Mark 4 and said, Jarvis, get me an operational projection, and then integrate my previous suit data, combined with the concept of the Mark 6 anti-lightning armor, and start analyzing and calculating. Quote. Jarvis. Yes, sir. Quote. On the other side, Pichu, who returned to the room, took the vibranium reactor and communicated the system in his heart. Author's note. Thank you for the 2,000-point reward and 2,000-point reminder of Chin Shiming UX. Just finished eating this chapter. I saw the reward and reminder. Thank you very much. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 71. In the room. System, how do you calculate the energy absorption at the origin level? Pichu held the vibranium reactor in both hands and asked about the system in his heart. System. Master, in fact, the evolution point is the embodiment of the origin level energy. With the current efficiency of the system, it can absorb the energy of 1 evolution point in a second. Quote. 1 evolution point per second. Hearing the system's words, Pichu calculated in his mind. 200 kilowatt-hours equals 1 evolution point. 1 evolution point in a second, 60 points in a minute, 3,600 points in an hour, and 86,400 evolution points in a day. 86,400 evolution points, if converted to electricity. Well, that's 17.28 million kilowatt-hours of electricity. If he absorbs electricity, he can now swallow 14.4 million kilowatt-hours of electricity a day without interruption. System, your efficiency is not equal. After a brief calculation, Pichu couldn't help asking. System. Master, do you think electricity can compare to the energy of the source level? No, you can't. Quote. Shaking his head slightly, then Pichu thought of something and said strangely. But under normal circumstances, isn't it more difficult to absorb more powerful origin level energy? It stands to reason that if the efficiency is not equal, the efficiency should be lower than that of electricity. Quote. Master, have you forgotten something? The system seemed to have a helpless voice. What's the matter? Pichu blinked and shook his ears. System. It is the system that absorbs the energy of the origin level, and it does not use the basic energy absorption plate, but the more powerful origin level energy absorption plate, which I remember I told you at the beginning. Quote. Did you say that? Hearing this, Pichu rubbed his cheeks and made a thoughtful gesture. Well, it seems like it was said at the beginning. Ahem, that system, it's not like I didn't think about it for a while. Pichu rubbed his cheeks, his right ear trembled, and he said with some embarrassment. After all, I've been in this world for more than a year unknowingly, and for nearly 2 years, you know that it's easy to be forgotten about this kind of thing that is not very important. Quote. System. If the system is an individual, it will definitely have a black line on its face at this time. What are you kidding? Such a high-end origin level energy absorption plate is just not a very important thing, so what is an important thing? Without dwelling on this matter, Pichu changed the topic and said. System, as long as I put the vibranium reactor on my body, you can absorb energy, right? System. Yes, the master, but after all, the owner has to have contact with it. If it is too troublesome to hold, the master can make it into a necklace style and wear it on the body. Quote. Necklace, wear it on. Hearing this, Pichu blinked his eyes and asked, what, can you do the system? Amount circled dot operator O circled dot operator. The system seemed to choke for a moment, and then said, Master, I don't have this function, my function template only has the 3 main sections of evolution, energy, and time and space. Quote. Time and space, does it mean to travel through the world? Hearing this, Pichu raised his right hand and rubbed his cheeks, rubbed the arc and played, and asked, since it's called time and space, do you have a storage space or a sub-functional plate in the small world of the system? System. Master, this one doesn't. Quote. Pichu. Really? System. This one really doesn't. Quote. Pichu. Give you another chance, is there any? System. Master, let me think about it. Quote. Pichu. GKD. System. Okay, this can be there. Quote. That's right, that's my good system. Hearing this, Pichu showed a satisfied smile on his face. But it's just that the system spoke up again. I need the master to get a spatial treasure that is at least the origin level, so that I can use its origin to derive a small world template under the main template of time and space. Quote. Origin grade space treasure. Hearing this, Pichu was stunned for a moment, then pouted and said. Like a space gem. System. Yes. Quote. Pichu. Are you just absorbing power, or is it the whole package? System. Pack. Quote. Understood, goodbye. Quote. Waving his hand, Pichu didn't bother to say more. Anyway, he was not in a hurry to use it now. Anyway, he was poor and white, and he didn't have anything to carry. Just asking, Pichu wanted to see if he could put an energy source such as the vibranium reactor into the storage space and let the system absorb the energy directly from it. After all, it's not convenient to hold things in your hands all the time, isn't it? Space gem, even if he got it, he wouldn't dare to swallow it to the system like this. After all, this thing has a great impact on the plot. Who knows what kind of butterfly effect it will cause in the future when the space gem is gone at the beginning. Is it a small wind or a hurricane tsunami? It's hard for Pichu to say about this, so if it is not necessary, Pichu will not make a big deal without authorization. After all, he still has to live in this world. Besides, isn't it fragrant to keep the space gem and keep devouring energy accumulation and evolution points? Small world. Ha! In case he fuses Arceus's creation ability when he evolves later, he can completely create a world by himself, and he wants to exchange space gems for a small world. As for whether it can be integrated into Arceus's ability, people always have dreams, right? Suddenly thinking of something, Pichu asked again, by the way, the system, when absorbing the energy of the vibranium reactor, can it also absorb electricity? System. Yes, master. Both subreddits run independently. Quote. Pichu. Okay, you can step down. Quote. System. After asking the question, Pichu threw the vibranium reactor onto the bed. Then he came to the right bedside, turned on the small reactor generator, pinched the copper ring connected by the cable with his left hand, and pinched the vibranium reactor with his right hand after jumping on the bed. Then Pichu lay on his back on the bed in a large shape. Looking at the ceiling, Pichu blinked, feeling very comfortable and happy in his heart. After all, with the vibranium reactor, he turned on the double suction mode, and the time to grow to 4 stars could be shortened by nearly half or a little more. In this case, when the Battle of New York comes, as long as he doesn't waste time, wouldn't it be appropriate to get 4 stars? It's a little too comfortable. After a while, staring at the ceiling, Pichu suddenly found that he seemed to be a little bored. So he closed his eyes and said, Jarvis, come a quiet piano song. Quote. Jarvis. Okay, Mr. Pichu. Quote. A soft piano tune sounded in a random room. At the same time, on the other side, Justin Hammer used his identity to unblock the relationship, and then found Ivan Vanko. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 72. Half a month later. Tony is still in the lab working on Mark 6, which is nearing completion. Pichu was also absorbing electricity and the energy of the vibranium reactor in the room. Suddenly thinking of something, Pichu turned off the small reactor generator, then looked at the tablet that was charging on the side, and turned on the internal network of S.H.I.E.L.D. After finding Nick Fury, send him a message to go over. Pichu. Braised eggs, has anything strange happened recently? After waiting for a few seconds and not responding, Pichu was not in a hurry. After a few minutes, there was a ding-dong sound from the tablet. Pichu looked at the chat window. Eagle King. What do you mean? What strange things? Do you know something? S.H.I.E.L.D. large base. Nick Fury, who returned to his office, saw the message Pickle had sent him, ignored Pickle's address to him, and looked directly at the content behind. After reading Pichu's news, Nick Fury couldn't help frowning. Strange things. What happened and how did he not know? Is there going to be some mess again? Villa room. I don't know, it's fake, I don't know, or I really don't know. Seeing Nick Fury's reply, Pichu couldn't help but raise his right hand and rub his cheek, and then began to guess how credible Nick Fury's words were. After thinking about it, Pichu still replied, "It's nothing, I'm just a little bored, so I'm trying to find someone to talk nonsense." Quote. Seeing Pichu's reply, Nick Fury's face darkened, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and he only felt that there was a sentence in his heart that, Mommy provoked fake, and wanted to give it to him. Fuck. In the end, Nick Fury sent 2 words to Pichu, and then immediately disconnected the call, and even kicked Pichu out of the chat channel very excessively, and then banned him for 3 days. Damn, you braised egg actually kicked me and didn't say it, and you dared to ban me. Seeing the prompt in the tablet, Pichu's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but groan, and then scolded and said, "Okay, you're floating, MD permission go, actually ban me, and there is a kind of non-demand for me in the future." Quote. Then Pichu turned off the computer, released the vibranium reactor with his left hand, rubbed his hands and face, and a large amount of golden arcs were released from the electrical bag. Cracking sound. All of a sudden, the whole room was filled with the crisp sound of an electric arc exploding. "Jarvis. Mr. Pickle, what's wrong with you?" Sensing another anomalous surge of electricity in the room, Jarvis asked. "It's fine." Quote. Hearing this, Pichu pursed his lips and said, expressing strong contempt for the permission behavior of the boiled egg in his heart, "MD, it's great to have permission." When he was angry, Pichu was also thinking in his heart, "It stands to reason that Thor's Meow Hammer also fell around this time. After all, Coulson set off for New Mexico when Tony was extracting new elements in the original plot." Quote. Although because of me, Tony made the vibranium reactor ahead of schedule, but it wasn't too long in time, and if it hadn't fallen by now, it would have been soon. Quote. Forget it, just wait. Quote. Thinking of this, Pichu didn't bother about this matter anymore. In fact, he coveted some treasures of the Asgard Palace. For example, the Frost Giant's supreme treasure, Ice Box, can be spotted by Odin and placed in the treasure house, and Pichu estimates that the energy in it will definitely reach the origin level. After all, it is the treasure of the Frost Giants, and it is said that it has the power to release the extreme cold that can freeze a planet. Such a treasure is definitely at the origin level. There is also the same eternal flame, the source of the power of the flame giant, Surtur, and the Soul with the eternal flame is a terrifying being that can destroy Asgard and bring Ragnarok. In terms of strength, Surtur, who is in his prime, may be stronger than Thanos without gems. Therefore, the eternal flame is undoubtedly also an origin-level existence. Of course, neither the Ice Box nor the eternal flame can compare to the Infinity Stones. After all, the 6 Infinity Stones were the supreme rule arcane treasures created by several extremely powerful cosmic gods with the 6 powerful cosmic secret energies generated by the Big Bang during the Big Bang. The power of the 6 Infinity Stones will converge and possess a terrifying energy that will subvert the universe. As far as Pichu knows, so far there has been no treasure or weapon more powerful than the 6 Infinity Stones in Marvel movies. After all, the 6 Infinity Stones have been in Marvel for 10 years. As for what will happen next, Pichu doesn't know for the time being. Although he hadn't read the Marvel comics, he knew that there were not many things in the comics that were more powerful than the Infinity Stones. Although the Marvel Cinematic Universe is an independent universe, it evolves according to the story of the comic universe after all, so the water in the cinematic universe is also very deep. At least parallel universes, multiverses, certainly exist. Of course, although the movie universe is also deep, Pichu is not panicking. With an infinite evolution system and the ability to travel to other film and television worlds, Pichu believes that he will one day be able to stand at the top of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or even surpass the Marvel Cinematic Universe. After coming to his senses, Pichu came to the living room with the vibranium reactor in his hand. Then throw the vibranium reactor on the couch and go to the refrigerator to take out drinks and food. Pichu. Jarvis, put on a movie. Quote. Jarvis. Okay, Mr. Pichu. Quote. Time passes slowly. Before I knew it, another few days had passed. Rod made a trip to the villa, and after some discussions with Pichu and Tony, he finally got his dream come true and wore the Mark II steel suit. After all, it is a future war machine, a member of the Avengers, and it can't be missing, isn't it? This day, Pickle saw the news online that Hammer Industries CEO, Justin Hammer, would be hosting a showcase tonight. Just finished reading the news, suddenly there was a sound of footsteps, and Pichu turned his head to look. I saw Tony, who looked a little tired, coming from the laboratory to the living room. Looking at Pichu, Tony spoke. Pichu, just now Paws called me and said that Hammer Industries has a show tonight, and said that an invitation was sent to us. Do you want to go? Pickle shook his ears, then pointed at himself and then at Tony. Well, it's us. Tony nodded affirmatively. Forget it, I'm not going, it's not interesting. Thinking of what might happen tonight, Pichu couldn't help but shake his head. Not going. Tony pressed the bamboo hole, then shook his head slightly and said, forget it, I won't go either. Quote. With that, Tony walked towards the kitchen. No, I guess it's up to you. Looking at Tony's back, Pichu couldn't help muttering in his heart, then turned around and grabbed a grape and threw it into his mouth. At this time, the tablet that was placed aside suddenly lit up, and Pichu took a closer look and found that it was Nick Fury. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 73. Braised eggs, what are you looking for me at this time? Seeing the call request sent by Nick Fury, Pichu shook his ears and muttered suspiciously, but the movements of his hands were not slow to agree. He'd rather see what Nick Fury was going to do. He still clearly remembered the silenced feud last time. What are you looking for me? After connecting, Pichu said a little unceremoniously. Straight down. Quote. Nick Fury on the other side heard Pichu's unceremonious inquiry, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, but thinking of the purpose of this time, Nick Fury still resisted the urge to end the conversation. What's the matter? Let's talk about it. Pichu said in a flat tone, but his big jewel-like eyes turned, and a certain guess couldn't help but appear in his mind. Nick Fury said in a deep voice, did you already know? Huh, what do I know? Pichu pretended to be surprised, and then said unceremoniously. Boiled egg, I tell you, don't wrong me, be careful that I sue you for slander. Quote. Nick Fury. After a moment of silence, Nick Fury continued. 3 nights ago, something fell in the enchanting wonderland of New Mexico, and last time you asked me if anything strange was happening, was that what you were referring to? At this time, Tony, who came out of the kitchen, heard Nick Fury's voice, took a bite of the sandwich, and then came to Pichu's side and looked at Pichu with inquiring eyes. Glancing at Tony, Pichu nodded. Then he pretended not to know anything, and wondered. What are you talking about? I just wanted to talk to you last time. You said that something fell in New Mexico. What thing can still get the attention of your big boss? When Nick Fury heard this, he was very helpless. Why is this Pichu so good at acting? Is this life like a play, all relying on acting skills? Although he was very helpless in his heart, Nick Fury was still calm on the surface, and said in a deep voice, okay, you don't have to pretend anymore, it's you who exposed yourself, let's talk about it. Quote. Pichu couldn't help pouting, and then said, yes, I had a showdown, and I did know what it was. Quote. What is it? Nick Fury's eyes froze. He only sent Coulson to New Mexico yesterday, so he hasn't gotten the corresponding information yet. The reason why he was looking for Pichu was because he thought about the last time Pichu looked for him. Although at that time he didn't pay much attention to Pichu's words. But when he learns that something strange has landed in the wilderness of New Mexico's enchanting wonderland, he immediately thinks of what Pichu asked him that day. Therefore, he wondered if Pichu had already known about it in advance. But at first, he was just suspicious, and he called just to test it. But he didn't expect Pichu to really know what it was. Want to know? The corners of Pichu's mouth lifted slightly, revealing a malicious smile. Tony, who was next to him, saw Pichu's expression change, and couldn't help but mourn for Nick Fury for a fraction of a second. Nick Fury, on the other side, also chuckled in his heart when he heard this, but after thinking about it, he still gritted his teeth slightly and said, "Yes. Okay, you want to know, of course I'm going to tell you." The smile on Pichu's face was extraordinarily bright. However, the bad feeling in Nick Fury's heart became more and more intense. He even subconsciously regretted why he sent this call to Pichu. Could it be that the flowers are no longer fragrant? Or is the sun no longer shining? Pichu, I want to know that it's okay, but if you want to apologize to me, just say, "Pai Shen, I was wrong, I shouldn't have banned you, please go buy some oranges for me." Quote. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Hearing Pichu's words, not to mention Nick Fury, even Tony on the side looked confused. Isn't this just an ordinary apology? But what does that last sentence mean? Tony decided to wait and let Jarvis check it out. He felt that Pichu's words would definitely not be so simple. On the other side, Nick Fury was stunned for a moment, then came back to his senses, and his expression changed again and again. Although Pichu's words seemed normal at first glance, he always felt that there was a big trap buried in it. As a super agent's instincts give him a kind of early warning in the dark. Let's not talk about what traps are in it, and let him and Pichu apologize, it seems unlikely. So gritting his teeth slightly, Nick Fury said with a dark face. It's impossible, let's say, what the hell are you going to say? I'm telling you not to go too far, otherwise when Coulson arrives, I don't believe S.H.I.E.L.D. won't be able to find out the origin of a thing. Quote. Okay. Quote. Pichu pretended to sigh helplessly, and then said in compromise. Well, let's reduce one of the remaining two conditions. Don't even think about it. Nick Fury immediately refused. Hearing this, Pichu couldn't help but say with disdain, "You have to figure it out, you guy who slammed the door didn't give me much electricity, and I can take the remaining two things as if they didn't count." Quote. If it weren't for the fact that I saw you at the beginning, especially Hill who treated me well, and you brought me here to Tony, I wouldn't have bothered to pay attention to you a long time ago, and you don't want to be a little white who gives you a little favor and gives you all your might. Quote. You. Hearing this, Nick Fury's face turned ugly for a while, but he couldn't refute it. Indeed, he hurriedly sent Pichu out. The difference between the amount of electricity Pichu had absorbed from him and the data he had received from Tony was not too big. Even if he is Pichu, the remaining two conditions can be regarded as non-existent. After all, everyone just takes what they need and cooperates, and everyone knows it at the beginning. Truth be told, Pichu remembers the remaining two things, the first being because of Hill. Then there is Nick Fury's early protection and the kindness that sent him across most of the country to Tony. Otherwise, Pichu would have forgotten the remaining two things a long time ago. It's worthy of being a good friend of my Tony Stark, even the big boss of S.H.I.E.L.D. dares to open up directly, and it's very polite, and there is even a kind of person who wants to turn his face immediately. Quote. Tony, who was next to him, heard the conversation between Pichu and Nick Fury, and immediately perked up and gave Pichu a thumbs up. Of course he didn't speak, he just thought about it in his heart. Seeing this, Pichu couldn't help but roll his eyes at Tony, and then continued to say to Nick Fury. Okay, I don't think I'm too lazy to bother with you with the help of Hill and you before, the other two things are equally valid, so let's get into the topic. Quote. Then Pickle briefly talks to Nick Fury and Tony, who is in the audience, about Norse mythology. Two things work, anyway, if the destroyer falls, there will definitely be one less. Pichu, who knows the plot, said that it is not too simple to clear the remaining two things. Author's note. Although I feel that the results are not very satisfactory, it should have something to do with my update, there are still so many people subscribed, so I stayed up late to code this chapter, thank you for subscribing and agreeing. Sleep. Strive for more chapters tomorrow. It's too sleepy to stay up late. The code word feels like a lot of typos. I've read this chapter twice. If there's still a mistake, you can remind me in the comment area if you see it. Closing parenthesis. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 74. Hearing the Norse mythology told by Pichu, Tony and Nick Fury were stunned. What does the good end do with Norse mythology? Although both of them knew that since Pichu said so, then it must have made sense, and it must have a lot to do with the thing that fell in New Mexico. Seeing Tony's bewildered look, coupled with the fact that Nick Fury on the other side didn't speak, Pichu immediately understood. The two of them have 9 out of 10 tricks, and there is still one trick left. I just talked about Norse mythology. Thor, the god of thunder, knows. Pichu decided to get through what they had left. Of course I know. Tony nodded subconsciously, and Nick Fury on the other side also replied. Thor, the god of thunder, a powerful god in Norse mythology who was in charge of war, power, thunder, lightning, storms, etc., even surpassed the Heavenly Father Odin in about the 1st century AD. Therefore, he is also considered by many to be the most powerful god in Norse mythology. Pichu, that thing that fell into the wilderness of New Mexico's enchanting wonderland is the Norse mythological Thor. Oh no, to be more accurate it should be called Thor's hammer, the mythical Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Quote. Of course, it wasn't just the hammer that fell there, but also the god of thunder from Norse mythology. Quote. What? Hearing what Pichu said, both Nick Fury and Tony were a little dumbfounded. How is it that this good and decent, even the legendary gods have appeared? Is this still the world they know? Nick Fury had learned the truth about the world after seeing aliens, people with god-like abilities, and 2 strange creatures with a cute appearance and terrifying inside. As a result, suddenly a god's thing and god appeared. Thinking of the unrivaled power of the gods in myths and legends, Nick Fury felt his eyelids jerk, and a sense of urgency suffocated him. As for Tony, well, almost doubted life. He was a super genius who studied science, and he actually heard that there was actually a god in this world. Even that god and his weapons fell in New Mexico. Is it true that others say that the end of science is theology? Looking at Tony's dumbfounded appearance, Pichu could probably know the expression of Nick Fury on the other side, so he continued. Of course, you don't have to be surprised. The water in this world is very deep, and the universe is so big that it can be said that there is no need to be surprised. Quote. While Thor's and Mjolnir's hammer in New Mexico are closely related to Norse mythology, you can think of them as a particularly powerful race. Quote. You don't have to think of the gods as too powerful, such as Thor's hammer, which is actually just Thor's father, Heavenly Father Odin, made of a Death Star's core fused with strange magical metal, which is different from myths and legends. Quote. If you want to kill Thor, you can try to launch dozens of high-yield thermonuclear weapons at once, and maybe you can directly blow him up. Quote. Hearing Pichu's explanation, Nick Fury and Tony were both speechless. Using a planet's star core to create a weapon, even if it deviates from mythology, is definitely not far behind. It even sounds more shocking than myth. And it is necessary to launch dozens of high-yield thermonuclear weapons at once to make it possible to take out Thor. Remember, this is only possible, not absolute. The cost of doing so is too great. Hearing Pichu's words, Nick Fury, a conspirator, couldn't help but tingle his scalp. A terrifying god suddenly appeared on Earth, and he couldn't imagine what would happen if this god was provoked on Earth. What's more, since the god of thunder has appeared, what about the gods of Asgard in the Norse mythology behind? For example, Odin, the heavenly father of the king of the gods. In the face of this terrifying existence, the earth seems to be somewhat fragile. The sense of crisis in his heart made him can't help but move his mind. After taking a light breath to regain his composure, Nick Fury squinted slightly and asked in a deep voice. Pichu, how did you know all this? Hearing Nick Fury's inquiry, even Tony couldn't help but look at Pichu. Looking at his expression, he was obviously waiting for Pichu's answer. That's right, that's a big point of doubt. How exactly did Pichu know all this? The more time they spend with Pichu, the more they find Pichu unfathomable. Hearing Nick Fury's inquiry, Pichu already had a saying in his heart. You can think of it as a superpower, or magic, and sometimes if something big happens, I perceive something in advance. Quote. Pichu, is there really such a thing as magic in the world? At this time, Tony, who had been listening quietly, finally couldn't help but speak out when he heard the words. Although he heard the appearance of the gods in mythology from Pichu, out of trust in Pichu, although he believed a little in his heart, he still did not fully believe it, and there was always doubt. After all, he is a scientist, and you tell him that science is okay, but how can he believe it when you say that theology is something that almost subverts science? What's more, it's just heard, not seen. Now that he heard the word, magic, from Pichu's mouth again, he finally couldn't help it. Yes, why not? Quote. Pichu nodded, and then said. I'm not sure how specific things like magic are. Anyway, you just need to know that magic is real. For example, Thor knows a little magic. Quote. Hearing this, Tony was still a little unable to adapt, and he felt that he had to take a good time. On the other side, Nick Fury heard Pichu's explanation. His eyes were slightly condensed, and he didn't know what he was thinking, and after a slight hesitation, he slowly said aloud. Pichu, can you handle this matter? He felt that Pichu should know more than what he had said before. Hearing Nick Fury's inquiry, Pichu immediately understood what he was thinking, so he rubbed his cheeks with both hands, and a bright smile appeared on his face again. If you want me to make a move, you can. Just one thing, I can help you solve the big trouble of Thor. What do you think of such a cost-effective business? Author's note. Thanks to the monthly pass of Icarus with a Watermelon. Marvel. Starting with Pichu, Chapter 75. Pichu, if you want me to make a move, you can. Just one thing, I can help you solve the big trouble of Thor. What do you think of such a cost-effective business? Quote. Quote. Nick Fury was slightly silent. Hearing Pichu's words, he didn't know what was going on, and he always felt as if he had lost 100 million. But thinking of the stakes, I can only agree to Pichu's conditions. Nick Fury. Yes, but you have to promise me that the god of thunder in Norse mythology will not be hostile to Earth or humanity. Quote. Pichu, I don't mean to joke with you in this kind of thing. Quote. Speaking of the back, Nick Fury's tone was very serious. Anne. After hearing Nick Fury's words, Pichu shook his right hand with great ease, and then said in a somewhat childish tone. I promise well, with me, Thor will not be the enemy of humans. Quote. Well, Thor is not. But there is also a mischievous god behind him, which he will not guarantee. And lo and behold, there is one less condition. Hearing Pichu's answer, the corners of Nick Fury's mouth twitched slightly. I don't know why, he always felt that something was wrong. But he couldn't speak, and this feeling made him feel very uncomfortable. It's like the feeling of constipation. But Nick Fury also knows that now is not the time to think about it. Nick Fury. In that case, then this matter will be given to you for the time being. I hope you will not disappoint me. After all, the consequences of this kind of thing are unimaginable, please. After saying that, Nick Fury directly ended the call. Ideographic period. Seeing this scene, Pichu was stunned for a moment, then raised his right hand and rubbed his cheek, looking weird. Nick Fury would even say something almost soft. Please, it seems that although this guy likes to do things as a Secret Service chief, he is still a very good person in front of big things. Tony, who was on the side, saw that the call was over, and couldn't help but look at Pichu and asked, Pichu, are you going to New Mexico? Although he was asking, he actually knew the answer. Pichu nodded. Thor descends to Earth. No matter how he is, he has to go and see it. By the way, let's see if we can play with a hammer. I'll go with you, Tony said immediately. He wasn't worried about Pichu's safety. After all, he knew that Pichu's strength was much stronger than him. Although the Mark VI anti-lightning armor that can absorb lightning energy has been created, and the energy core has also become a vibranium reactor. But he knew that even then he was unlikely to be Pichu's opponent. He wanted to go along, mainly to see the legendary Thor. Knowing that there is such a thing as a god, he believes that there are few people who are not curious. What's more, he was originally a person with a strong desire for knowledge. Perhaps the more talented people are, the stronger their intellectual curiosity will be. What are you going to do? Pichu couldn't help but glance at Tony, and then said angrily. I see that there is a wisp of black gas lingering in the center of your eyebrows, and you may be in trouble recently, so you should stay here honestly and don't run around all day long. Quote. Tony. What the hell, how does he think it's a bit of a god? However, seeing that Pichu would not let him go, Tony pursed his lips and then said. Okay, if you don't go, you won't go, isn't it just a thunder god, what's the big deal? Quote. Hearing this, Pichu suddenly looked at Tony with a, you are so sour, expression. Go, go, go. Quote. Seeing Pichu looking at him like this, Tony waved his hand in disgust, then turned and walked towards the laboratory. He wanted to see if he could optimize and upgrade all aspects of the Mark 6 anti-Thunderbolt armor, such as upgrading to the anti-Thor armor, and the like. And the name of the latter sounds obviously more domineering than the former, isn't it? Seeing this scene, Pichu shook his head with a smile, and then walked towards his bedroom with the vibranium reactor in one hand and the tablet in the other. After all, it's to go out to do things, so you don't have to take things with you. Back in his bedroom, Pichu takes off his translator and puts on Tony's refurbished and optimized Pikachu armor. The improved Pikachu warframe doesn't change much in appearance, but it has become more conformable to the body, and the joints have become more flexible. At the same time, the flight dynamics have been improved, and it can reach Mach 3 at full speed. Pip, send a message to Tony, I'll go first. Quote. Putting on the Pikachu armor, Pichu said as he walked towards the balcony. Hi. Yes sir, it's been sent. Quote. Quote. In response, Pichu came to the balcony, and then turned on the battle armor flight function and flew towards the sky. As for the location direction or something, there is a little skin in him who is not worried about getting lost at all. Originally, he wanted to fly over by himself. But out of consideration for many aspects, he decided to wear the suit. Meanwhile, New Mexico. Coulson, who had already been here, received a call from Nick Fury. Tell him that Pichu will get here as soon as possible, and then take over the temporary command of this operation, and then let him act when he wants, and in most cases listen to Pichu. Hearing Nick Fury's command, Coulson, although a little confused, didn't say much. After all, he has also understood the magic of Pichu in many ways. While waiting for Pichu to arrive, Coulson also led a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to build a temporary quarantine area centered on Thor's hammer. At the same time, Agent Hawkeye, who was nearby and had just finished his last mission, was also sent by Nick Fury. If it weren't for the fact that he and Hill couldn't pull their hands for the time being, Nick Fury would definitely send Hill over to take control of the overall situation even if he didn't go. Halfway through, Xiaopi's voice suddenly sounded. Sir, there's a call from Ms. Hill. Quote. Seal. Pichu was stunned for a moment, and then said, take it. Quote. Hey, Pichu. Hill's voice rang out. Pichu was a little puzzled. Haven't you been busy lately? Why did you suddenly have time to call me? Could it be that braised egg that asked you to call me? Look at what you said. Hill said helplessly. It has something to do with the director. He told me everything you said and what he said, and then I was a little worried, so I took the time to call you. Quote. Okay. Quote. Pichu smiled and said. Don't worry, don't you know me, it's just a thunder god. If I'm not sure, even if the boiled egg uses conditions to let me make a move, I don't bother to pay attention to it. Quote. Okay, I know you're the best. Hill couldn't help but smile when he heard this, first said a word of praise, and then continued. Then I won't bother you for now, and I'll come to see you when I'm busy and forget about it, bye-bye. Quote. Pichu. Okay, bye-bye. Quote. Author's note. Thank you for the, we are not mainstream, monthly pass. Closing parenthesis.